Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the third episode of the story, in which third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen transports Naruto to an alternate universe where Minato is still alive. Soon, Minato begins to regard this Naruto from another universe as his own son. Will Minato from the alternate universe return Naruto to his original universe? This story is from Random Flyer. Please support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. When Minato opened his front door that night, he almost thought that he'd entered a war zone. The front hall was a mess. Two trails of painted footprints led across the floor with crumpled paper scattered everywhere. Off to the side, he could see another, larger paint splatter leading out of view. Minato was almost scared to move farther into the house. What happened? Minato asked the heir, not expecting an answer, but he got one anyway. Naruto was stuck in the house all day. Kakashi's bored voice came from just inside the sitting room. Minato set the files he was carrying down on the side table in the hall and followed the voice into the sitting room. This room hadn't fared much better, though Minato was relieved to see that the paint trail veered around the rug. Dirty clothes were scattered all across the room and half of the books from the bookshelf were on the floor. Kakashi stood by the bookshelf replacing the volumes. "Welcome home, sensei," he said without looking up from the task. "Naruto did all of this?" Minato asked, a little flabbergasted. Kakashi shrugged. "Technically, Naruto's traps did all of this, the rest was from Rin chasing him around the house trying to make him clean it up." For a moment Minato could only stare, then he shook his head. "I knew you said he was laying booby traps everywhere, but I never imagined." "I know." Kakashi rolled his one visible eye. "Kid has too much energy for his own good. I feel sorry for whoever ends up being his sensei." Picking up some of the scattered laundry, Minato sighed. "Probably because of the Kyuubi," he muttered, half to himself. He tossed the shirt toward the door and started gathering up the other scattered clothes. Though, keeping an 8-year-old indoors most of the time doesn't help much either. "Rin said you weren't to do any cleaning," Kakashi said, flipping through a book before he replaced it on the shelf. "She wants Naruto to clean up the majority of the mess." "So why are you putting away books?" Minato countered, not stopping his laundry gathering. Kakashi just looked at him. "It'll take forever to get this place cleaned up otherwise." "Exactly," Minato said, hefting up the pile of laundry and bringing it out to the hall. He dropped the pile in the washroom hamper and left to find his son. Minato followed the colorful trail of footprints leading up the stairs, careful to stay out of the half-dried paint. When he reached the top step he could hear voices coming from down the hall in an unused bedroom. "This is dumb," Naruto's voice drifted out of the room in a whine. "No," Rin corrected, "what's dumb is trashing the entire house, especially after it was finally looking nice again. Do you know how expensive that vase was?" Minato could just hear the constant rhythm of scrubbing coming from the room. It stopped as Naruto asked, "No, do you?" "Well, not precisely, but it looked expensive," Rin nearly growled. "Keep scrubbing, you have a lot of cleaning up to do and then you're going to bed early." "What?" Naruto cried, "But I don't want to go to bed early." "That's exactly why it's punishment," Rin replied with a snap. Naruto grumbled something too low for Minato to hear and the scrubbing continued. Minato stifled a chuckle. Part of him was mad for coming home to the house half destroyed, but another part was feeling a bit nostalgic. Dealing with an over-energetic child was something he had looked forward to when Kushina was expecting. He knew from the amount of damage that he should be furious, but he couldn't drag out his anger to that level. Perhaps the whole situation was too bittersweet to get truly upset. As long as it only happened once, he reminded himself. Schooling his face to something more stern, Minato pushed open the door, giving him a view of the two occupants. Rin was covered in paint and glitter, splotches quickly drying over her hair, clothes, and skin. She sat on a desk, keeping her feet out of the way as Naruto, also covered in paint though absent the glitter, scrubbed away at the colorful mess on the floor. Rin looked up, eyes widening slightly when she saw it was Minato. "Sensei, I didn't realize you'd come home." Minato made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "It's fine, Rinchin. We'll get the house cleaned up." Naruto's head shot up, hope filling his expression. "It's fine? So I don't have to clean anymore?" "No," Minato corrected in a matter-of-fact tone. "You made this mess so you'll clean it up, it's called consequences, Naruto-kun." "Neither of you are any fun," Naruto grumbled, turning back to scrubbing away at the paint. "Rinchin, would you mind leaving us for a moment?" Minato asked, looking up to the medical nin. "Of course, Sensei," Rin said, sliding off her perch and moving to the door. "I'll order takeout since there's not going to be any time to cook a real meal tonight." "Ramen!" Naruto cried, jumping up off the floor. "We'll get something healthy with lots of vegetables," Rin replied in a firm voice before disappearing around the corner. "I hate vegetables," Naruto said to the empty doorway before dropping back down to the floor. "Man, you guys really are no fun." Minato had to fight a moment to keep the chuckle inside and firmly restore his stern expression. He crouched down so he was more level with Naruto on the floor. "Fun or not, you can't pull pranks and make messes without expecting something like this to happen." Naruto only grumbled in response. "Naruto-kan, look at me," Minato said, keeping his voice calm and patient. Naruto reluctantly looked up from his scrubbing. His face was fixed with a pout, complete with frown and furrowed brows. It was the same face Minato had seen on several young academy students when they didn't want to listen. Fighting back a surge of both amusement and exasperation, Minato ignored the face and tried to explain the situation rationally. "Things are very busy right now with everything that's happened. Rin and Kakashi are helping me out by looking after you while I'm away performing my duties. You should behave for them." "You're the Hokage," Naruto replied, sulking, "they have to do what you say." Minato tilted his head from side to side, half agreeing with the statement. True to some extent, but a good leader has subordinates who do things for them because they want to, not because they have to. A large part of the sulk left Naruto's face as he thought about that, though he still wore the frown. "But there's nothing to do here," he said, trying a different tactic. "I'm not supposed to go to town and I'm not at school, not that I'm complaining about that." Naruto added quickly before finishing off with a shrug. "There's just nothing to do." Minato nodded, settling himself down on the floor into a more comfortable position. "I know it's strange right now, and when everything settles down you'll be going back to school and that will fill up your day. Until then, though, you need to bear it. We're shinobi, after all, that's what we do." Naruto didn't look convinced but he nodded his head anyway. "You can still go outside to the yard, as long as there's someone with you," Minato said, trying to come up with suggestions, "and I'm sure either Rin or Kakashi would be willing to help you practice what you've learned at the academy so far. That way you won't be so behind when you go back, but just promise me, no more pranks, alright?" Naruto reluctantly nodded his head. "Alright, when will you be able to spend time with me again?" Naruto asked, looking sidelong at Minato. Minato couldn't deny the happy rush that washed through him knowing that Naruto wanted to spend time with him, even if he couldn't give the best answer to the question. "When I get caught up with my work," he answered as honestly as he could. "It'll only be a few more days, and things should quiet down at the office, I'm sure of it." At least, he hoped that it would. Strange, Minato used to pray for busy office days, now they were becoming obstacles to getting home and being with his son. The thought made Minato wonder how he was going to tell Naruto he was the boy's father. He had the entire day to ruminate on it and still didn't have an answer. Looking down at his hands, Minato figured it was as good as any time, but he struggled to bring up the topic. He opened his mouth only to close it again, grappling with the right words to broach the subject. In the meantime, Naruto only gave a half-hearted shrug at Minato's reassurances and returned to scrubbing the half-dried paint on the floor. He didn't even notice Minato struggling to find words, the Hokage's mouth opening and closing like a fish. In fact, Naruto's head never came up from his work until Rin's voice called from nearby, "Sensei. Naruto-kun. Dinner." Naruto shot to his feet faster than Minato was able to register the call. "Yay! Food!" Naruto cried, dodging around Minato and out the door, brush and bucket. Abandoned where he left them in the middle of cleaning. Minato grumbled to himself, annoyed that he had missed a perfectly good chance. Still, there would be another opportunity to discuss the issue, he just had to be ready for it. He couldn't help laughing thinking about Naruto's enthusiasm for dinner. Apparently, the boy had forgotten about Rin's parting comment when she left for takeout. Sure enough, a minute later as Minato descended the stairs, Naruto's scandalized voice came out of the kitchen. "Vegetables. Why? XXXXX." Naruto woke up screaming. He shot bolt upright in bed, eyes wide and unseeing, shaking with tremors and drenched in a cold sweat. He barely had a chance to remember where he was when Minato burst into the room, several kunai in hand, ready for anything. Naruto dimly noticed the Hokage checking the room before putting the kunai away and moving to the bed. "What's wrong?" Minato asked, sitting down and pulling Naruto into his lap. Naruto, still recovering from the nightmare, only whimpered. There were so many emotions swirling around inside that he couldn't make sense of them all. He was terrified from the dream, basically the same one he'd been having, and disoriented from the abrupt awakening. Confusion swept through him, making him dizzy. It only seemed to get worse as Minato held him close, rocking him back and forth as he did several nights ago. Part of Naruto was relieved that Minato was there and glad for the comfort, but as he looked up into the Hokage's face, another feeling from deep inside rose as well, vague but strong. It took several moments of grappling with it before Naruto recognized it. It was anger. It was a deep and inexplicable anger. More complicated than just plain anger, in truth, but Naruto was too confused to fully explore the depths of the emotion. He didn't want to explore it, didn't want it to be there at all. He didn't understand why it had appeared since he couldn't think of anything that had happened that would make him angry at Minato. Even if the Hokage had been busy for the last several days, Minato had been nicer, kinder than anyone he'd ever met before in his life, including Old Man Sandaime. None of it made sense. Shaking his head, Naruto pushed away from Minato and shuffled to the other side of the bed as he moved away from the source of at least some of his confusion. He grabbed his hair in both hands, curling himself into a ball, trying to make it all to stop. "Naruto?" Minato asked, worry evident in his voice. Naruto felt a gentle hand land on his shoulder. The contact made him flinch and he struggled not to cry as he curled tighter into himself. He wanted to fling himself into Minato's arms and let the man rock away the fear that clung to him from his dream, but he also wanted to attack the Hokage and act on the undefined anger bubbling up at hearing the man's voice. Instead, he just shook his head, trembling with each new breath he drew into his lungs. "Please, Naruto, I want to help," Minato said, sliding closer, the comforting hand still in place on Naruto's shoulder. "Just leave me alone." Naruto cried, unable to take it anymore. He wanted the whirlwind inside of him to stop, all the confusing and conflicting emotions to just go away and leave him in peace. "Please leave me alone," he begged again, the plea almost ending in a sob. His voice muffled by his arms. The hand remained on his arm, but Naruto didn't look at Minato. The air seemed thick and heavy around them, making Naruto feel worse. Maybe he had insulted Minato and now the man wouldn't want anything to do with him. "If you talk about it, I'm sure it will help," Minato said once more, pleading in his voice as his hand squeezed Naruto's arm. "Just tell me what's wrong." Naruto only shook his head, violent jerks back and forth that rocked his whole body. He couldn't tell Minato about the dream. It would mean admitting how they treated him in the other village, admitting that there was something wrong with him that made people hate him. What if Minato and Rin and Kakashi and the old pervert decided that the villagers were right and wanted nothing to do with him? Naruto couldn't take that chance. Then there was the red mist. How could Naruto ever explain that to Minato? How could he explain how it hunted him in his dreams and even now felt like it was filling the room? He didn't even understand it. How could he make someone else understand or believe him? Adults never listened when he told them anything, never cared, never believed. Even if he did somehow explain, and for some reason they did believe him, would they still want him? It would land him in the same position as explaining about the other village and how everyone there hated him. Naruto shook his head again. He couldn't do that, wouldn't risk what he had gained in this new place. He could suffer through the nightmares at night. The daylight always made them go away, well, except for the red mist. That seemed to be clinging to him for longer periods of time. The constant half-thought in the back of his head was always there, also, but if he stayed busy and distracted himself from it then he would be fine. "I'm fine," Naruto repeated when Minato didn't leave. "Really, I'm fine." He tensed, waiting for the comforting warmth on his shoulder to leave. It was several long minutes before Minato heaved a heavy sigh. "All right," he said. Naruto could hear the reluctance and sadness in his voice. "If that's what you want, but if you need me I'm just down the hall." The hand withdrew even though Minato remained where he was sitting. Another few minutes, another sigh, and the pressure on the side of the bed let up as the Hokage moved to the door. Naruto didn't shift from his position, didn't look up as Minato stood in the doorway, but he listened and still tense at the heavy atmosphere that filled the room. "If you need anything at all," Minato reminded him one last time before his footsteps padded out of the room. Naruto could hear him mutter a few words, probably to Kakashi and Rin since they were the only other ones in the house. The door swung closed, stopping inches from the frame to let some of the hall light into the otherwise dark room. Naruto was grateful for the small amount of light as he flopped over and focused his gaze on the small sliver of hallway. He knew that he wouldn't be getting back to sleep again. The tremors still ran down his arms and his heart still beat a little faster than normal. He didn't know what time it was, but it was going to be another long wait till sunrise. XXXXX Naruto poked at his food, head propped up by his arm on the table. He didn't feel like eating. He wasn't particularly hungry. It was a strange experience, sitting at a table with food in front of him and not wanting any of it. Granted it wasn't ramen and there were vegetables in this food, but Rin was a pretty good cook when things came down to it. Normally, Naruto would happily devour almost anything set out for him, but today he just wasn't feeling it. Swallowing a huff, Naruto pushed the food around, piling it into little mounds before leveling them again. He hadn't gotten much sleep last night, especially after the dream. He hadn't wanted to go to sleep after that, didn't go back to sleep. Now, he was exhausted. Rin seemed to realize that he was tired since she didn't comment on his lack of eating or his playing with his food. However, she did send several pointed looks in his direction. Kakashi didn't seem to notice anything, face buried in his book as always. The meal was quiet, more so than what had been the norm since he'd arrived in the different Konoha. Naruto supposed that it was partly his fault. Rin still seemed a little annoyed at him for destroying half the house the day before and they'd only just gotten the remaining mess cleaned up right before lunch. She'd been in a grumpy mood all day. He'd been in a grumpy mood all day, from the sleepless night to the restlessness that seemed to fill him. He couldn't quite explain it. He was so tired, too exhausted to put on his usually smiling face, but he couldn't sit still either. He had to go somewhere, do something, but he didn't know what. He tried sitting down and drawing like Kakashi suggested, but he couldn't concentrate and Kakashi just ended up taking the pictures away after patting him on the head. Drawing was boring anyway. Naruto was sick of it. Rin tried to teach him some drills, but those involved sitting down and Naruto couldn't make himself sit down. He ended up wandering around, but apparently his two guardians didn't trust him not to cause trouble, and at least one followed wherever he went. Kakashi finally got tired of his endless wandering around the house and sent him to the backyard to practice kata until lunch. Now, lunch was almost over, though, and Naruto still didn't know what he wanted to do. He got up from the table, bringing his dishes over to the sink, where Kakashi was taking his turn washing them. "Naruto-kun," Rin said, bringing her own plate over, "why don't you take a nap? You've been tired all day." The thought of going to sleep made Naruto's insides shrivel into themselves. He shook his head, desperately hoping that they didn't make him. "I'm not tired," he said, denying his drooping eyes and the yawn that forced itself out of him only minutes before. No, even if they put in a room and told him specifically to sleep, he wouldn't so much as close his eyes. Rin didn't look convinced and opened her mouth to say something, but she was interrupted by the front door opening and hurried footsteps. She moved out into the hall, Naruto following behind, curious. In the front hall, they caught sight of Minato halfway up the stairs. "Sensei, is everything all right?" Rin asked, dishes still in her hands. Minato stopped, reversing his forward momentum to turn back and look at them. "There's been an accident," he said breathlessly before turning and running up the rest of the stairs. His voice floated down as he continued to explain. "A sealing jutsu got out of hand. I have to get to the training grounds and try to reverse it, but first I need some of my notes." There were a few bumps from upstairs, then a crash and a muffled curse that made Rin glance from the ceiling to Naruto with disapproval. Then, suddenly it was quiet. "I guess he headed right there," Rin said with a final glance to the ceiling. "I hope no one was hurt," she murmured and turned back to the kitchen. Naruto turned to follow her, but she stopped him. "Naruto-kun, why don't you go upstairs and take a nap for an hour or so? You've been quiet all day. I'm sure you'll feel better after some rest." "But I'm not tired," Naruto whined, even as Rin turned him around and gave him a slight push towards the stairs. "Yes, you are," she said with a slight chuckle before she turned and disappeared into the kitchen. Naruto grumbled to himself, making sure to take a long time dragging his feet up the stairs. He didn't care what anyone said. He wasn't tired and he wasn't going to take a nap. It didn't matter if the last several nights he'd woken up and hadn't gone back to sleep. He was too old for naps, for one, and he wasn't going to put himself through any more nightmares, for two. He'd find something else to do. As he reached the top of the stairs, Naruto saw something he hadn't seen since first arriving to the house. The door to Minato's office was unlocked and open. Naruto froze, one foot on the second floor and the other still on the top stair. For a moment, he didn't do anything, just stared at the forbidden room. He glanced back down the stairs where he could hear the soft clatter of dishes and running water mingled in with muted conversation. No one would be coming to look for him for a while. They thought he was taking a nap. Turning back to the door, a wide Cheshire cat grin spread over Naruto's face. He knew exactly what he was going to do for the next hour. XXXXX Minato didn't get home as early as he had wanted thanks to the interruption of the training accident. One of the Chunins trying to teach themselves a complicated sealing jutsu made an error, landing both themselves and a teammate in the hospital. It took the better part of an hour to sort out the mess the jutsu had made and then the rest of the afternoon to figure out exactly what had gone wrong and treat the two injured. By the time Minato dragged his tired feet through the door, dinner was half over. Rin, Kakashi, and Naruto were already finishing their own meals and beginning to clean up, with Rin directing a reluctant Naruto to help with the dishes. Kakashi disappeared, perhaps to do a perimeter check but more likely to read his book. Minato finished his own meal quickly and headed up to his office to return the notes that he had taken out earlier in the day, and hoping to get a few more things taken care of before spending some time with Naruto. Opening the door and stepping inside, Minato barely registered the fact that it was unlocked before he had to dodge out of the way as a series of objects flew toward his head. Already tired from a day of work and acting on training, he transported himself to the other end of the room and threw 2 kunai at the objects, skewering 2 large pillows to the wall. Feathers flew out of the eviscerated pillows and slowly drifted down to the floor along with a series of streamers and crumpled paper that had also been rigged to fall. For a moment Minato stared, unsure what the trap was doing there in his supposedly secure office. It was clearly a prank, but neither Kakashi nor Rin would ever prank his office, and they were the only ones with access to the room that had been at the house. Thinking back to the last time he had left his office, he realized that he'd been in a rush to get to the training grounds and the site of the accident. And used to having to lock the room in the first place, he'd forgotten to secure it. That left one other possibility: Naruto. Naruto had set up the prank even after Minato had asked him not to rig any other traps. More importantly than that, Naruto had come into his office even though Minato had specifically told him not to enter the room. Minato felt his temper, already short from the hectic day and seeing 2 young ninjas be hospitalized because of a reckless idea, snap. He marched back to the door and flung it open to its widest. "Naruto! Up here now," Minato called. He heard the anger and frustration in his own voice even as he yelled down to the first floor and paced back into the room, counting to 10 in an attempt to calm himself a little before Naruto arrived. When that didn't work, he counted to 10 again. A noise alerted him to Naruto's presence and he spun around facing the door. Naruto looked unsurprised, though not as though he was feeling guilty in any way. Minato motioned for Naruto to enter the room and gestured to the 2 pillows pinned to the wall. "Care to explain those?" Minato asked, carefully controlling his tone from his initial shout calling Naruto up to the office. "You found my trap." Naruto grinned, "And it looks like you beat it, too. You must be really fast." The carefree attitude only angered Minato more, the irony of which wasn't lost to him. Only yesterday, Naruto had booby-trapped the entire house and Minato hadn't even really scolded him for it. Today, Naruto set only 1 trap and Minato was furious. Perhaps it was dealing with the 2 injured Chunin, only 5 years older than Naruto, who had almost killed themselves by going against what they were told in combination with Naruto directly going against the rules and entering the office. Perhaps it was a small amount of self-anger for forgetting to lock his office, which held more dangerous jutsu, substances, and weapons than he could count and that he would never trust within reach of an 8-year-old. Whatever it was, this time Minato wasn't willing to chuckle off the transgression as the mere prank of a bored child. He tried to rein in his anger, though, even through the flashes of what could have happened if his son had gotten into the wrong thing while in the office alone. "Do you remember what I said about my office when you first came here?" Minato asked, his voice tight and low. Naruto picked up on the anger and shrunk down into himself a little, the grin falling off his face as he searched back in his memory. "That I wasn't supposed to come in here?" "Exactly," Minato said, "and do you remember what I told you yesterday?" Naruto ducked down a little more, hands fiddling with each other as he answered in an even lower voice. "That I wasn't to lay any more traps in the house? Now care to explain to me why there's a trap waiting for me in my office?" Minato said, arms crossed over his shoulders. It was hard to stay mad at Naruto with him looking up through his blonde hair with those blue eyes, but every time Minato felt his temper wane he thought of what could have happened, bringing his son back to the hospital for some reason, and it surged again. Naruto didn't answer. He didn't look around at the mess of feathers and he didn't look up at Minato's face, opting instead to stare down at Minato's knees, and bringing one hand up to the back of his neck. "It's just a prank," Naruto finally said, his voice sullen. "What's the big deal? Nobody got hurt, it wasn't even dangerous." "That's not the point," Minato snapped, before taking another deep breath. When he spoke next his voice was calmer, more measured. "I told you not to lay any more traps, but you did it anyway. I told you not to come into my office, but you came in at the first chance you saw. If I tell you to do or not do something you need to follow my directions. We don't have time to be constantly cleaning up and making sure that you're not causing some kind of trouble. Silence was the only thing that met Minato's statement. It hung heavy in the air as Naruto continued to scowl at Minato's knees. "Why did you do it?" Minato asked again, frustrated at Naruto for not answering and at himself for losing his temper. "I'm bored." Naruto cried, throwing up his hands, anger flaring suddenly. "What else am I supposed to do? You're gone all the time and you're only going to send me back anyway, so what's the big deal? If I'm so much of a bother to you, send me back now. I don't care." By the end, Naruto was yelling, his fists clenched in front of him and trembling with emotion. He crossed his arms over his chest with a jerk and turned his glare to the floor. Minato didn't know how to react at first. The thought that Naruto would want to go back was like a punch in the stomach. It didn't matter if Minato didn't know how to send Naruto back, and by default the boy had to stay with him. If Naruto wanted to go back, even with the way his village probably treated him, Minato didn't know if he could handle that. Looking at his son, though, the angry but sorrowful glare, the set face forcefully holding back tears, the trembling fists jammed under his arms to keep them still, Minato knew Naruto didn't really want to go back to the other Konoha. The boy was upset and angry, partly with just cause. Minato reminded himself, thinking of all the time he'd spent away in the past few days. If it had been someone else's child that fell through the mirror, it might have been different, but this was Naruto, Minato's son, and Minato wanted his son to be happy and cared for, not just by babysitters but by Minato himself. Bending down on one knee, so he was level with Naruto, Minato put a hand out on Naruto's soft blonde hair. He pushed it back, bringing the blue eyes so like his own up to look at him. Even then, Naruto's eyes didn't rest on Minato but stared past him at some point over his shoulder. "You're not a bother, Naruto, and I don't want to send you back. I want you to stay here." Naruto looked at Minato then. His eyes shifted over to Minato's mirroring blue gaze, a look of surprise bordering on suspicion filling in where the anger had been. "You want me to stay? Forever?" "Yes, forever," Minato said. "Why?" Naruto breathed, eyes wide. "Say it," Minato yelled at himself, "stop being a damned coward and just say it. I want you to stay, because, you know how we said before that some people were dead in this world but alive in your world? And the other way around, as well?" Naruto nodded, confusion joining in with the shock. Minato put both his hand on either of Naruto's shoulders. "Well, in this world, I had a son who died at birth and his name was Naruto." Naruto's eyes had grown to an impossible size. His mouth dropped open and he seemed to be struggling with what Minato was saying. "In your world, your father died, but here it happened the other way round." Minato stopped himself, he was making this too complicated. "What I mean is, I'm your father if he had survived, and you're my son if my Naruto had survived." Naruto still stared at him with that same wide-eyed amazement. His mouth worked up and down a few times before his eyes dropped to the floor, a confused frown taking residence on his face. "My dad, but it's been days. Why didn't you tell me right away? Why have you been gone so much?" Minato sighed, scrubbing his face with a hand. He hooked his other arm around Naruto and led them both to a seat, pushing a few scrolls down to the floor to free up the small couch set against one wall. "It's complicated," Minato finally said, thinking of all the reasons and excuses that he made previously to avoid telling Naruto. They seemed so weak now, even though he knew some of them were still valid. In the end, he guessed a large part of him had just been afraid. "Our situation is very complicated," Minato repeated, not wanting to wade through the convoluted circumstances that had led to this moment. He was still working through parts of it himself and he doubted Naruto would understand most of it. "But I'm telling you now, because I want you to know and I want you to stay." "Do you want to stay?" Naruto looked startled by the question but nodded, a fervent and almost desperate gesture. Minato couldn't help himself, he pulled Naruto into a bone-crushing hug, feeling the small arms slip around him after a brief hesitation. Are you really my dad? Naruto asked, his voice muffled against Minato's Hokage jacket. Yes, Minato said, burying his face into Naruto's soft hair, in every way that matters. In his arms, Naruto shuddered, drawing in a breath before letting it out in a half-sob. He tightened his hug, relishing the moment. It was worth any trouble that they gained later on from either village. I know this has been hard for you and I'm sorry I haven't been here for you as much as I've wanted to, but I have responsibilities to the village, too. I can't ignore those just because I want to spend all my time with you. He felt Naruto nod into his chest. You're the Hokage, after all, Naruto mumbled, but there was a note of pride even apparent in the shaky voice that hadn't been there before. But it's so boring here, even with Kakashi and Rin. It's not the same. I know, Minato repeated, wishing he could help. An idea struck him, though he doubted Kakashi or Rin would be very happy about it. After we get everything straightened out you'll be able to go back to school. This only elicited a moan from Naruto. Minato huffed a soft laugh. What if I let you pull one prank a day? But it has to be a good one. But I thought after the mess I made I wasn't supposed to be doing that anymore? Naruto asked, shifting to peer up at Minato with one eye. Fat lot of good that rule did, Minato muttered, rolling his eyes. I know we said that, but one prank is alright, I suppose, so long as it's not too destructive, he quickly amended. Now that Minato thought about it, it would be good practice for setting traps. And you have to stay out of the forbidden areas, alright? Especially my office. But the door was unlocked. Naruto's tone wasn't defiant anymore as he defended himself. I don't care if the door is wide open, Minato said, pulling away to fully look down at his son. There are dangerous and sensitive things in here, you could get yourself hurt by coming in here without someone with you. I don't want anything happening to you. Naruto stared at him with that same amazed expression. It reminded Minato of Kushina so much and it hurt knowing it was there because of the life Naruto had led, just like Kushina. In many ways, Minato reflected, in getting his son back he was getting a piece of his wife back, as well. He couldn't help but smile at that thought, receiving a wide happy smile in return. So only one prank a day? Minato asked. He wanted Naruto to agree instead of just taking for granted that the boy would listen to him. Nothing too destructive and no going into out-of-bounds areas. Naruto looked at him with speculation, thinking it over. You have to come home for lunch and dinner every day. Minato was glad that they were alone in the room. He was negotiating with an 8-year-old, a Hokage negotiating with his 8-year-old son to behave while he was away at work. It was embarrassing and made him want to either laugh at the absurdity or growl in frustration. He wasn't sure which. Alright, I'll be home for lunch and dinner unless there's an emergency. Then, I have to take care of whatever it is no matter when or how long it takes. Naruto chewed his bottomed lip for a moment as Minato said this. But if it's just paperwork you have to come home. Minato huffed a laugh, wearily nodding in concession. If it's just paperwork, I'll come home and when I do you can tell me about the prank you pulled. Minato had a stroke of genius at that moment, well, genius or insanity. Try and catch Kakashi in one of your traps. He'll be a good challenge so you'll have to plan and set it carefully. Hopefully, Naruto would spend a large part of his time trying to devise ways of catching Kakashi in a trap and the planning phase would help give him something to do. That or Minato had only countered a fire jutsu with a wind. The clock chimed the hour, making Minato look up at the time. It was getting late and they both needed to go to bed. Naruto especially looked tired with growing dark shadows under his eyes. He glanced around the mess of his office. Part of him wanted Naruto to clean up the mess for punishment, but it would be safer to just do it himself and he didn't want to encourage Naruto coming into the office anymore. The mess could wait the night. Come on, Minato said, standing up and pulling Naruto to his feet as well. It's bedtime. Naruto groaned as Minato ushered him out the door, closing it firmly behind the both of them this time. You are in no position to complain about anything. I'm still debating what your punishment will be, Minato said, continuing to steer his son down the hallway. I hate bedtime, Naruto grumbled, and Minato could hear the underlying statement there, unsaid but clear. What the boy really hated was the nightmares, and Minato silently agreed. XXXXX Minato woke up to blood-curdling screams. It took him a split second to orientate himself and disentangle his consciousness from memory and dreams. No, he was not on the battlefield of some shinobi war. He was in his house, and those screams belonged to Naruto. Naruto's nightmares had been getting worse. Minato wasn't sure what caused them. Besides that one time in his office, Naruto refused to talk about them. He didn't even let Minato comfort him anymore after that one time several nights ago. However frustrating it had been, Minato had tried to respect Naruto's wishes, but hearing those awful screams even louder than the screams the previous night was the final straw. They had to deal with these nightmares, one way or another. Concentrating on the seal marker he had placed in Naruto's room earlier in the day, Minato flashed himself into Naruto's room, determined to stay until he found the cause for the nightmares. He didn't need to wait long. As soon as he landed in the bedroom, he could feel the concentrated malice and power, like a physical pressure bearing down on him. It was same power that he'd felt 8 years before on that horrible night. Looking wildly around, Minato found the source, a dense cloud of red chakra, the Kyuubi's chakra, circling around Naruto. For a moment, Minato was frozen in horror as he stared at his son, thrashing within the cloud of malevolent chakra. A memory from the last time he'd encountered that same chakra tried to crash in on him and overlay itself on the real world, but Minato pushed it back with fierce determination. Behind him the door was thrown open and he heard Kakashi gasp. "Sensei." "The Kyuubi's, I know," Minato called back, searching for a way to get close to his son. "Get some chakra suppressors from my office." He didn't have to look to know Kakashi had already gone. The chakra around Naruto lashed out toward Minato, making him throw his arms in front of him and step back. The power still burned, searing his sleeves and tinging the skin. "Naruto," he yelled, trying to break through whatever nightmare his son was trapped in and capture the boy's attention. Naruto didn't hear him though, didn't seem to register anything that was happening around him. From the side, Rin slowly circled around trying to find a way to get closer to the bed and the thrashing boy, but Minato already knew it would be useless. The Kyuubi's chakra filled up the space. Just being in the room, Minato could feel the prickle and sting against his skin. Around the bed the chakra was even thicker, visible in red swirling wisps of power like fog or mist. If they wanted to get anywhere near the bed safely, they needed to suppress the chakra. Still, even knowing this, Minato couldn't help but edge closer, hoping against reason that he could find a way to get to his son. The chakra was painful to him and he was at the fringe of it. Naruto was at the very center. Who knew what such dangerous power was doing to his son? Kakashi appeared again, probably after only a few moments, though it felt like longer. He had a stack of chakra suppressors in his hand and didn't hesitate before slapping one on the wall. The malevolent pressure around the seal lifted immediately and Minato breathed a little easier, but it did nothing for the chakra surrounding Naruto. Without stopping to think, Minato grabbed the seals from Kakashi, spilling half of them on the floor in his haste. He dove into the red chakra surrounding his son, gritting his teeth against the burning pain that seared through his arms. Minato slapped a seal on the first part of Naruto he could reach, wrapping the paper haphazardly around a captured arm. Then, he placed more seals on Naruto's stomach and the surrounding bed. The Kyuubi's chakra immediately started dissipating with the seals in place. Naruto shot up, eyes snapping open and gasping for breath as a scream died on his lips. Minato caught his shoulders, holding firm despite Naruto's frantic struggles against the hold and not even feeling the pain in his burned hands. One look at the boy's unfocused eyes told Minato that Naruto was still half asleep. "No!" Naruto yelled, shaking his shoulders and throwing his arms around blindly. "Get away!" "Naruto!" Minato said, gasping a little as the boy twisted out of his grip. He recaptured Naruto's shoulders again, sucking in a breath as the pain in his hands registered. Glancing down, his hands were burned raw in a waving pattern across his hands and up his arms. Minato pushed back the mounting pain, though, and focused on his son. "Naruto! Wake up, you're dreaming." "Wah!" Naruto stopped struggling, looking around with wide blinking eyes. His chest heaved and soft whimpers came out with each breath. He looked up at Minato and something seemed to break in his eyes. He dissolved into tears, throwing himself at Minato's chest. It was everywhere. Naruto wailed, stuttering with each heaving sob. "And I tried to run, but couldn't." Minato hushed, rocking his son back and forth in a tight hug. He turned worried eyes on Kakashi and Rin as Naruto's sobs turned any words the boy managed into jumbled garbles. Rin was pale, one hand distractedly treating a burn she had on her forearm. Kakashi watched Naruto with analytical eyes, worried but already trying to unravel what just happened. Minato looked at the other two and nodded toward the doors, silently asking they leave. "Sensei, your arms," Rin hesitated, looking with concern at Minato's burns. No doubt she knew from her own burn that it wasn't an ordinary wound. Minato could feel the pain creeping up from the wounds like they were tainted with poison in addition to the burns. He was glad for his high pain tolerance born from many serious injuries and the lingering trace of adrenaline still in his system. They would hold him over till Naruto was looked after. Kakashi grasped her arm, pulling her toward the door. "We can go get Tsunadesima. She can help Sensei and check Naruto." Rin nodded her agreement and left the room, leaving the door open as they went. Minato turned from the empty doorway and refocused his attention on the bundle in his arms. Naruto didn't seem to notice the others depart. He was too busy sobbing into Minato's chest. Minato's heart ached, but he was glad Naruto was finally letting out whatever had been bothering him. The shadows under Naruto's eyes had only gotten darker over the last couple days and the nightmares had gotten worse, for good reason it seemed, Minato reflected, thinking back on the wreath of Kyuubi chakra that surrounded Naruto. Something had to give, and it looked like it was Naruto's determination to hold it all in, like the previous nights when Minato or the others had woken or checked on him after bad dreams. They sat together on the bed, Naruto wrapped in Minato's arms and Minato rocking him till the crying subsided and the boy grew heavy with drowsiness. Naruto wouldn't let himself fall asleep, though. Minato could tell he was keeping himself on just the waking side of consciousness. "You need to tell me about your dreams," Minato said in a low, sympathetic voice. "I know they're frightening, but you need to trust me." Unlike the previous nights when Minato had made the same request, Naruto hesitated. He looked up at Minato, the internal struggle visible in his eyes. "It's all right, everyone has nightmares. It's nothing to be ashamed of." Minato was grasping at straws now, trying to find something to draw Naruto out of his shell. Naruto didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. The pregnant silence was broken when Rin appeared at the door. She looked at them for a moment, hesitating before speaking. "Tsunadesima is here." Minato glanced up, tearing his eyes away from Naruto. He nodded, lifting Naruto and setting him on the floor before standing up after him. With a gentle hand, Minato steered Naruto out into the hall. "Come on, this will be quick." Tsunade was waiting down in the sitting room, her clothes slightly disheveled and the stale smell of sake clinging to her like perfume. Despite the telltale signs of a night spent in one of the local bars, her eyes were bright and alert, latching onto Naruto as soon as the boy entered the room. "All right," Tsunade said, her voice a little quieter than normal. Minato briefly wondered if it was because of the situation or if the medical need was hung over. Though Tsunade wasn't necessarily bad with patients, her bedside manner wasn't usually one of her more redeeming qualities. "Sit up here." She pulled the table out from the wall and lifted Naruto up onto it. "I don't see why I need an exam," Naruto grumbled, starting to sound like himself. "Hush, Tsunade," responded, but she wasn't looking at Naruto anymore. Her eyes were on Minato's arms, red with burns. She looked up to Minato with a frown that turned into a scowl when Minato shook off her concern and instead moved to Naruto's other side. Huffing in exasperation, Tsunade turned back to the grumbling Naruto and placed a glowing hand on Naruto's back. Her expression faded into a concentrated frown as she ran her scan. Her hand moved slowly down to the small of Naruto's back where it stopped, and Tsunade's frown became more pronounced. "Naruto-kun, take off your night shirt for me, will you?" Tsunade said in a level tone. Naruto complied, sat with his arms crossed over his chest, eyes mildly glaring at the distant wall. "Now lie down," Tsunade directed again. With a huff, Naruto laid back on the table. Tsunade placed both glowing hands on Naruto's stomach, right over where Minato knew the seal would be if it was visible. Minato's hands twitched at his sides, the burning pain in them growing more pronounced and spreading with each passing minute. He watched the Medicnan's hands as she gently probed Naruto's stomach before flicking his gaze up to her serious face. After a moment, Tsunade's eyes caught Minato's and she gave a significant look down to Naruto's stomach, removing her hands as she did so. Taking the nonverbal invitation and fighting back a grimace from the pain, Minato placed his own glowing hands where Tsunade's had been a moment ago. He wasn't a medical ninja, but considering the location was the exact place where Naruto's seal lay, he assumed Tsunade wanted him to look at that specifically. Gently probing with his chakra, as much to accommodate the pain in his arms as to be gentle with Naruto, he ran over the state of the seal and demon fox it imprisoned. Within moments Minato realized what Tsunade wanted him see. The Kyuubi's power behind the seal had grown. Brow furrowed in a worried frown, Minato looked up to Tsunade. When he first checked the seal, the Kyuubi's power had only been half as much as the demon fox originally possessed. Now, the power inside Naruto was noticeably larger. Tsunade leveled a knowing look at him, before flicking her head to the door. Minato nodded and straightened from his bent position. He looked to Rin. "Why don't you take Naruto to the kitchen and get him a snack? I'm sure some ramen will help calm some nerves after that nightmare." "Yeah." Naruto quickly agreed, smile blossoming over his face and sounding almost normal again. He jumped off the table, as eager to get away from any more medical examinations as to get to his ramen. He ran up and grabbed Rin's hand, dragging her to the door with Kakashi trailing behind and stuffing the extra chakra suppressant seals in his pocket. "You heard him. He said I could have ramen, now you can't say no." Minato eased out some of his growing tension with a small sigh. At least, Naruto seemed to be slowly getting over the fright from the nightmare. The relief was only minor, though, considering what he had found behind Naruto's seal. A hand clamped down on his shoulder and Minato found himself being firmly steered by Tsunade to the table. "Up," Tsunade commanded, jerking a thumb to the table. Minato scoffed. "What? You're injured, much more than the brat was, unless you want to leave those burns on your arms to themselves." Tsunade crossed her arms and leveled a look at Minato that never failed to make him feel like a genin being chastised for a rookie mistake. Glaring at nothing in particular, Minato carefully lifted himself onto the table. "Treating me like a child," he grumbled under his breath, wincing at the pain in his arms. "You and Naruto have an uncanny resemblance, you know that?" Tsunade said, rolling her eyes. She reached out and took Minato's hand, drawing it out to look at the burn marks. "I examined Rin's burn before the two of you came down. The Kyuubi's chakra seems to act like a poison. It seeps into the system after contact. These burns will be more painful and take much longer to heal than a normal injury." Tsunade ran her glowing hands down Minato's arms, a frown of concentration on her face. It's amazing that kid of yours can stand having that chakra in his system. He's had to live with it his whole life, Minato said quietly as a wave of regret washing through him. There was a moment of silence before Tsunade spoke again. You saw it then? Minato straightened where he sat. Of course I did, he almost snapped, head jerking up. He glanced back down, pushing back the lingering self-recrimination with a slight shake of the head. It would be hard to miss, he said in a more even tone. Tsunade didn't seem to notice Minato's initial tone, or perhaps she understood. You probably could tell more than I could. It's your seal, your work, after all. Minato shrugged, earning himself a disapproving glare from the moment. He winced as a flare of pain shot through his arm before fading again. Tsunade was being thorough with her healing and already he could feel an improvement to his arms, but the pain was still there, waiting to rise again at the slightest provocation. Your medical ninjutsu is enough to tell you the important thing. The Kyuubi's power is increasing. Any ideas why? Tsunade asked. Minato thought about it a moment, eyes raking over the rippled burn pattern on his arm Tsunade was holding. This possibility hadn't occurred to him, but now that he thought about it, it seemed almost inevitable. The Kyuubi here was never sealed into a Jinchuriki, Minato said slowly, checking his theory over silently for flaws. Kushina dragged it down with her when she died. But you can't kill a tailed beast, Tsunade said. Shaking his head, Minato agreed. No, but they will. Dissipate for a time, disappear until they reconstitute in this world. The Kyuubi's chakra is still out there, it's just not concentrated into the solid form of the demon fox. Now there's a sizable concentration of the Kyuubi's chakra for it to gravitate toward. Naruto, Tsunade finished for him. Her tone was exasperated but with underlying worry. Won't the seal protect him? Minato only half heard her, but he was already considering that problem and answered in a thoughtful tone a moment later. The seal is designed to allow chakra to seep out in case he needs to use it. It may be possible for the chakra to seep back in as well. The Kyuubi's chakra is so corrosive, and the seal was only meant to hold in half the Kyuubi's power. If this continues, then Naruto will have far more than the full power of the Kyuubi inside him. Minato brought up one hand to fitfully rub at his forehead. He stopped when Tsunade halted the motion, wincing at the painful sting running through his hand. He could only spare half his attention for it and the admonition from Tsunade to not touch anything. She reached down into her bag and pulled out a jar of salve and roll of bandages, but he barely registered the movement. He was too caught up in the new problem confronting him and his son. The Kyuubi's chakra had no substance, it wasn't even visible unless in high quantities. Walls wouldn't protect Naruto. The only thing they could do was place seals around the house to block out the demon chakra, but that was hardly a permanent solution. Naruto wouldn't be able to leave the protective walls of the building, a virtual prisoner. Still, until they could find another way to solve the problem it would have to do. There wasn't any obvious physical problems that I could find, Tsunade said after a long pause as Minato was weighing everything in his mind. She had finished applying salve to the burns and was almost done wrapping bandages down each arm. Besides the fatigue and still being underweight, he's fine physically. Naruto's been having nightmares, increasingly bad nightmares, Minato said almost to himself. He looked down at his right hand, now completely bandaged and feeling much better even with the phantom pain lingering just below the surface. Well, it seems fairly obvious what's causing them, Tsunade said, wrapping a layer of bandages over Minato's fingers. The Kyuubi's chakra is filled with negative emotion. It's just as likely that he would have non-physical side effects as well after being bombarded by such a large amount of the stuff. Minato nodded absently, furrowed gaze sliding to the doorway as he thought about Naruto's behavior the past couple of days. The quick temper and restlessness, it could all have a plausible, normal explanation, but he knew there was something more to it. Minato felt a stab of regret for spending so much time in the office. If he hadn't, he would have more first-hand observations instead of having to rely on Rin and Kakashi. When Tsunade finished with the last bandage, Minato slid himself off the table without permission. He still had to be gentle with his hands, but they were much better. "I'm not finished with you yet," Tsunade grumbled as Minato moved to the door. Minato paused in the doorway, looking toward the kitchen where he could hear soft voices drifting out from lightened room into the dark hall. "I'm going to talk to my son," he said before stepping out of the room, and this time Naruto was going to tell him everything. XXXXX Naruto grinned into the half-eaten bowl of ramen, his second for the night. Rin seemed a little more open to indulging him tonight, and he wasn't going to waste that opportunity. The dream was already almost completely faded away, dissolved in the bright kitchen with a warm bowl of ramen before him and two friendly people on either side of him. Naruto would be happy to spend the rest of the night in the kitchen even if he didn't get a wink more of sleep. He certainly didn't want to go back to a dark bedroom alone and be revisited by the night terror. His eating slowed a moment as Naruto briefly remembered the dream. It had been the worst yet, almost physically painful. He pushed the thought back before it could take hold again and cast about for something, anything else on which to refocus. Minato pulling him from the dream came to mind, and from there he went to the conversation earlier in the evening. Naruto stopped eating entirely as he stared into the bowl. The ripples in the soup slowly stilled as he held his chopsticks suspended over it, trying to sort out the confused mess of emotions inside of him. "Hey, Rinsen," Naruto started, still staring into his bowl with a furrowed expression. "Yes, Naruto-kun?" Rin said. Naruto could hear worry in her voice, the same touch of worry that had convinced her to give him seconds for ramen. "Is something wrong? Is Minato really my dad?" Naruto asked. Minato had said he was, and Naruto believed him, he really did, but a part of him still needed some kind of confirmation. Rin and Kakashi both paused, Rin halfway through sipping her tea and Kakashi in the midst of turning a page. They glanced at each other over Naruto's head before Rin finished her sip and set her cup down and Kakashi leaned back from his book. "Of course he is," Rin said, sounding a little at a loss from the question. "He told you himself last night, didn't he?" Naruto ducked his head, a little embarrassed by Rin's incredulous tone. "I know that it's just hard to believe." Kakashi filled in after a moment of silence. "Too good to be true, maybe?" Naruto nodded, staring at Kakashi in surprise. That was exactly how he felt. He'd gone for so long without parents and family in a place where everyone seemed to hate him. Now, he found himself in a place where people didn't hate him. More importantly, he was with his hero, the Yondaime, savior of the village, who suddenly turned out to be his father. It was like a dream. It was much too good to be true. "Waiting for the other shoe to drop?" Kakashi asked, once again knowing exactly what was going through Naruto's head. That other shoe was exactly what Naruto was waiting for, even if he hadn't realized it at first. He knew he would be able to handle it, whatever it was, as long as he knew what to expect. It was the waiting to find out, the uncertainty, that was killing him. "Don't worry, Naruto-kun," Kakashi said, turning back to his book as he leaned his chair back on two legs. "Minato's not going anywhere and you're not going anywhere. You're 8. Complications aren't something you should be concerning yourself with. If there is another shoe, Minato will take care of it when it drops. That's what parents do." Footsteps made the three sitting around the table to turn as Minato appeared in the doorway. The blond man smiled at the group as he came in the room. "Feeling better?" he asked, looking at Naruto. Naruto barely heard the question. He was staring at Minato's bandaged hands, a sick feeling growing in his stomach that he couldn't explain. "Of course he's feeling better," Rin cut into the slightly awkward silence after Naruto failed to answer. "He's finally eating his precious ramen." The lightness in her tone, though clearly forced, helped the whole room. Naruto felt the tension in his stomach ease just a little, and Minato sent an appreciative smile to the medic Nin. Well, I want to ask Tsunadesima something before she leaves, Rin commented as she stood from the table and placed her cup in the sink. Kakashi didn't bother making an excuse as he let his chair fall back down to the floor with a clatter, rose from the table, and followed Rin from the room. He paused by Minato and the two exchanged a few whispered words. Then, Kakashi left and it was just Minato and Naruto in the quiet kitchen. Naruto turned back to his ramen. He had a feeling the coming talk was going to be about his dream and he really didn't want to go into it. Picking up his chopsticks again, he stirred them around in his ramen soup and listened to Minato's footsteps as the man first went to the cupboard, retrieved a mug, then moved to the table sitting in the chair next to Naruto's. Naruto didn't look up to Minato. He started to, but his eyes faltered and stopped at the bandages. He watched the injured hands as they went about pouring the tea Rin had left in her teapot into an old chipped cup. Speckles of red bled through the white strips around the knuckles and other points along the arm. "What happened to your arms?" Naruto blurted out, unable to keep the question or the queasiness at bay much longer. Minato stilled a moment then set the teapot to the side and took a sip of the steaming drink. Naruto followed the hand up to Minato's face and forced his gaze to stay there so he wouldn't have to look at the bandages anymore. He hoped it wasn't his fault, whatever had happened. The villagers at home always hinted at something being wrong with him, that he was different than other kids. A few times, he'd even heard the word monster bantered about before it was quickly hushed up by others. Here, with Minato, he'd started to believe he was normal, well, at least not different in a bad way, but the old insecurity was back with a vengeance. Minato frowned into his mug a moment before catching Naruto's gaze. "It's not something for you to worry about," he said at last, "and it's not as bad as it looks." Naruto disagreed. The bandages ran all the way up Minato's arms into his sleeves. He wanted to ask if the red mist had done it. He thought he remembered that as part of his dream, but that would be silly. The red mist was only a part of his nightmare. It couldn't be real. Instead, he looked back down at his ramen, stirring the remaining noodles around in their soup. "Naruto-kan," Minato said, his voice cautious, "you've been having those nightmares for days now. Don't you think it would be best if you talked about it?" "I don't want to talk about it," Naruto protested with a slight shake of his head. "I know you don't," Minato said as he leaned forward, elbows on the table before quickly picking them up again with a grimace. "But it will help and I need to know what's wrong if I'm going to be able to do anything." Silence stretched out as Naruto continued to stare into his bowl. "Think of it like pulling out a splinter," Minato said when Naruto failed to respond. "It hurts for a moment, but leaving it where it is will only make things worse." There was a pleading quality to Minato's voice. "Please." How could Naruto say no to that? No one had really asked anything of him before, well, maybe Iruka-sensei. Most people just ignored him or chased him away. Minato hadn't done any of that. Minato was his hero, his dad. Naruto wasn't entirely sure what it meant to have a dad, but, glancing up quickly at the bandages, he thought he was starting to get an idea. Taking a deep breath, Naruto kept his focus on the soup in front of him, slowly twirling the noodles round his chopsticks. "They started out like the night I left the village, but the ANBU guys never came and I ended up running away from the bad shinobi and villagers that blamed me for the invasion. And there's this red mist, too. It follows me everywhere, like it's hunting me and it hurts every time it touches me and it's filled with so much hate and anger. Now when I have the dream, I'm just running through the burning city with the battle going on everywhere and the red mist is everywhere and I can't get away and no one comes to help." Naruto was close to tears again, choking on a lump that formed in his throat. Every night the dream had gotten worse. He dreaded going to sleep. The thought of being plunged into that fiery version of Konoha made his insides shrink. As much as he hated going to sleep, he equally hated the thought of Minato or anyone else finding out how he was treated. He didn't want their pity, or worse, have them agree with the villagers. Suddenly, Naruto regretted all the pranks he pulled, worried that would give his newfound friends and father a reason to push him away. Into an empty and lonely apartment again. Hands took hold of Naruto's shoulders and he was turned to the side, facing Minato. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Naruto. I know it was hard for you there, being alone, but you're not alone anymore. You have to believe me on that. Naruto looked up half dreading seeing the unwanted pity in Minato's eyes, but it was only understanding and sadness and maybe just a touch of anger. Minato hesitated, visibly drawing in a conscious breath and hands tightening on Naruto's shoulders a fraction before asking another question. Back in your old village. Did anyone ever harm you like that before? That was on question Naruto really didn't want to answer. He didn't see how he could get out of it though, after tell Minato about his dream. He set his gaze on Minato's shirt and forced himself to answer. The villagers didn't like me but they never chased me like they did in my dream. No, he never had a mob come after him, but he'd been pushed and shoved, had things thrown at him to make him go away, been ignored, avoided, glared at and called names. Sometimes groups of kids ganged up on him and one night someone had kicked in his door yelling curses, but they'd suddenly disappeared almost immediately afterwards. He couldn't go back to that life even after a few days of living with people who liked him. The loneliness would kill him. You still like me, right? Naruto asked after a breath, desperately needing the reassurance, even though they didn't back home. One of Minato's hands came up to cradle Naruto's cheek as the man slipped off his chair to crouch in front of his son. Naruto, I love you and nothing anyone else says or thinks is going to change that. Minato leaned forward, peering into Naruto's stunned face. I can do something to get rid of the nightmares, but you have to do your part, too, alright? Minato said, just trust me. You're not going to be left alone here, alright? No one's going to treat you like that and there's always going to be someone to take care of you for as long as you need them. Tears spilled over, making Naruto scrub at them, but they were tears of relief rather than the ones that threatened a moment ago. Someone really wanted him here, Naruto realized, his eyes catching the bandaged arms again as the truth hit him. Minato wasn't just saying those things. He really meant what he'd said in the office earlier that night and just a minute ago. Naruto couldn't help himself as he threw himself off the chair and into Minato's chest. The relief, the happiness that swept through him demanded action. Minato poofed as he was knocked off balance and landed on his backside on the kitchen floor, but he didn't hesitate wrapping Naruto in a tight hug. A wide grin spread across Naruto's face. He really had a father, a family. It was like a second chance. XXXXX Kakashi crouched in his hiding place. His eyes burned with fatigue and his muscles were strained and cramping but he wasn't able or willing to relax yet. They had placed a scroll with key information the spy, Q, was looking for in one of the makeshift information store rooms. They had circulated, discreetly, that it was there but only temporarily until a more secure location could be found. They were hoping the short window of opportunity would encourage the spy to act quickly. Besides Kakashi, there was Shikaku, Inoichi, and Choza positioned in the immediate vicinity. Kakashi chose them specifically because he knew their high caliber as shinobi and their special talents in apprehending an individual. The Ino Shikacho group would not be able to help in the operation for long, though. Inoichi should have been resting after an injury he sustained the day before, and Choza and Shikaku were needed elsewhere for the war effort. It was another reason why they needed to act quickly and encourage the spy to take the bait sooner rather than later. Kakashi was almost getting restless when Q appeared, large stack of files and folders in hand. The copynin watched as the spy wound his way through the maze of file cabinets and shelves the intel division had crammed into the small room. Only one other intel nin was in the room besides Q and the hidden Kakashi. Q slowly put away the files into the respective drawers and shelves. Kakashi noted the spy's surreptitious glance across the room at the other intel nin currently leafing through some files. Minutes passed as Q took his time putting away his files. The other Intelnin found whatever they were looking for and left, shoulders stooped and head bent low over the information. Q paused, flicking through his last file as the other shinobi shuffled out of the room. He waited another few minutes after they left before sliding his file in place, walking over and checking the doorway. Apparently satisfied, Q moved back fully into the room. This time though, his movements were quick and decisive. Kakashi tensed at Q's change in demeanor. The trap was almost sprung. Kakashi forced himself to relax and wait as he watched Q dismantle the protective seals over the planted information. They had been careful to make the protection on the scroll challenging but not too difficult for Q to overcome. Still, it seemed to take ridiculously long for the spy to break through. They had agreed at the outset of the operation that they would wait until the spy had taken the bait and tried to leave with the information. All involved agreed that they didn't want to afford Q any chance to deny what he had done. It would give them greater leverage when it came time for the interrogation. So despite the strong impulse screaming at him to strike now, Kakashi drew up every ounce of training he had received, forced himself to remain still, and wait. Q finally finished winding his way through the layered defensive jutsus and nervously glanced over his shoulder at the door. He stared at the doorway for a moment, head cocked in a listening pose, before he turned back to the lockbox containing the information. After the jutsu protecting the scroll, the lock was no trouble. In general, ninjas didn't use ordinary locks to protect vital or important items. Sealing and locking jutsu were much more effective. Since the invasion, however, security had been so compromised they were using every means of security available. Easing the lockbox open, Q reached in and pulled out the heavy scroll. Kakashi had to again remind himself to wait. He could almost hear his old sensei's voice advising patience. He watched the spy hurriedly unroll the scroll. Q pulled out a second blank scroll and laid it out on top of the first. Running through a series of hand signs, Q muttered under his breath. Kakashi recognized the seals as a variation of their own scroll-copying jutsu, the same jutsu the staff of the Hokage Tower and other sensitive areas had used to duplicate important information on smaller traveling scrolls. The variation Q was using, however, was different. There were several extra hand signs thrown in that Kakashi couldn't decipher the meaning. If he had been at his top game, the copynin would almost certainly determine what the extra signs in that order would do to the jutsu, but as it was he was exhausted, worn down from fatigue and the constant stress since the invasion began. So, Kakashi filed the signs away to work out later. There was a flash of light and words bled from the bottom scroll to the top, creating a photocopy of the original. After quickly checking his work, Q re-rolled the original scroll and placed it back in the lockbox. Kakashi let the spy secure the lock and security seals. He even let Q turn and take a few steps toward the door, allowing the spy to feel a moment of triumph, thinking he had completed his mission successfully. In that moment, when Q thought he could drop his guard, Kakashi gave the signal to close the trap. Shikaku and Inoichi appeared, blocking the exit. Through the door, Kakashi could see Choza in his position down the hall. Finally, Kakashi stepped out from his hiding place deep in the shadows. Q froze, wide eyes swinging from the two shinobi in front of him to Kakashi behind him. "What, you?" Q sputtered, astonished and angered at the confrontation. "I'm going to have to ask you for that scroll," Kakashi said in a bored drawl, "and to come with us quietly and without a fuss." He would be lying if he said he wasn't enjoying the moment and the wild look in Q's eyes. The amount of damage this one person had caused had wiped out any sympathy Kakashi might have felt. A part of him actually hoped Q tried to get away. Q cursed under his breath, head whipping back to the door and the shinobi blocking him. "Don't try it," Shikaku said, voice low and commanding, hands ready to cast a jutsu. There was a moment when no one moved. Then, the silent room burst into action as Q dodged to the right, setting off a spurt of flame from his mouth. Inoichi and Shikaku easily dodged, only to realize the true target had been the priceless information and intel that lined and filled the room. documents burst into flame around the room. Using the distraction of the flames, Kyo dodged out of the room and into the hall. Kakashi cursed and quickly doused the fire in a water jutsu. He should have waited till Kyo was out in the hallway before springing the trap. Water flooded through the room, dousing the flames and documents alike and leaving behind a soggy mess for some low-ranking intel nin to clean. Then, he followed a step behind the others out of the room. Coming out the door, Kakashi stopped. Kyo was a third of the way down the hall, froze in his tracks and entangled in the tendrils of Shikaku's shadow. The shadow's sharp ends had even pierced through the legs at several points to anchor the spy to the floor. Usually the head of the Nara clan wasn't so brutal right off the bat, but Kakashi supposed he was as disgusted and angry with the traitor as Kakashi was. It didn't matter though, they had the traitor and they had him alive. This was the exact reason he had chosen the Narashikacho Shinobi to help with the capture. Roughing him up a little before taking him to interrogation would probably help. At the very least, it would make the four men feel a little better considering what had happened to their home. Kyo strained against the black shadows holding him in place, but it was no use. He cursed and glared and grit his teeth, eyes flashing between his captors and the door at the far end of the hallway, still blocked by Choza. "That's not going to help," Kakashi drawled, sliding up the hall toward the traitor. "They say a single man defending his home is worth 10 soldiers invading it. You're a single man invading our home coming up against 4 men defending it." Kyo didn't answer, but his glare deepened as Kakashi drew close, pulled the copied scroll out and handed it to Inoichi. "I'll get the other one," Inoichi said and hurried back into the storeroom to collect the original decoy scroll. Following Inoichi with his eye, Kakashi almost missed it but the slight move on his periphery drew his attention. He turned back and spotted the small scrap of paper slipping inconspicuously along the wall, almost to the door. "Choza," he called pointing to the paper. Choza turned looking in confusion before he saw the paper just slipping past him. He reached out a hand expanding it to increase his chance for grabbing the paper but it slipped by the hand with a twirl. Kakashi took off after it, dodging around Choza and through the door. "Get the prisoner to interrogation," Kakashi called over his shoulder. "I'll take care of this." He didn't hear their reply since he had already turned the corner. The paper was difficult to keep up with, considering how small and agile it was. It also moved much quicker than Kakashi would have expected only. Improving his belief that it was a message sent off by the spy. Though he hadn't encountered her himself, he'd heard reports from the front lines about a kunoichi fighting with the AIM forces that used paper and origami as part of her jutsu. That combined with a scrap of almost lifelike paper attached to Amigekure's spy in their ranks was too much of a coincidence. He couldn't let the paper get away and potentially carry more information back to the enemy. Kakashi almost lost the paper as it made a sudden turn and flew out a wide broken window. Grabbing onto the mangled window frame, he was able to swing himself out of the window with almost no break in his stride. The sharp edges of broken glass tore at his uniform, but Kakashi didn't even notice as he fixed his eye on the tiny scrap of paper headed for the Hokage Tower and put forth a new burst of speed. Kakashi ran through the rubble of damaged and destroyed buildings, desperately trying to keep up with the scrap of paper that flitted ahead of him. He was quickly approaching enemy territory, where he would have more things to worry about than simply losing track of his quarry. He cursed his own slower-than-average speed. Thanks to his fatigue, he was barely able to match pace with the paper. As they grew closer to the Hokage Tower, Kakashi tried to estimate what damage to their forces losing that information would cause. Kakashi couldn't help but remember the Sandame's earlier warnings about keeping the information from their opponent. "We need to prepare for every possibility," Sarutobi said, unrolling a blank scroll. "I'm sure your preparations are more than enough to capture this spy, but war is unpredictable. We can't predict everything that will happen." "Hi, Hokage-sama," Kakashi agreed. He understood entirely what the village leader was saying. He, himself, had been caught by surprise many times thanks to a lack of information or an exceptionally clever enemy. The old Hokage nodded, carefully dipped a brush into ink and began writing on the scroll. The majority of the information I provide will be false. However, to ensure it appears genuine, I will have to include at least some authentic information. Even this small amount of information could be dangerous in enemy hands. Kakashi nodded in understanding, eyes steady on his leader as the older man drew out seals and wrote lines mixing truth and falsehoods with a practiced hand. We know that the enemy had several goals when attacking our village. One, undoubtedly, was to reduce our military strength and force, an objective they clearly achieved. Another may have been to start a war between IWA and ourselves, which is a definite possibility. The third objective, I'm certain, was to kidnap Uzumaki Naruto and gain possession of the Kyuubi. Kakashi's eye narrowed. He could well believe the enemy was after Naruto specifically. The enemy had been attempting to take Naruto out of the village when Kakashi and his group of ANBU caught up with them at the beginning of the invasion. Jinchuriki were constant targets of both abduction and assassination wherever they were, so the idea that Naruto was one of the enemy's goals was not a surprising one in principle. The surprising thing was that they knew about Naruto's status at all. The villagers, for all their dislike and even hatred of Naruto, had never broken the Sandame's law about talking of the demon fox or Naruto's status. The few who had come close were severely punished and served as an effective example for the rest of the village. That left the question of how the enemy knew that Naruto was a Jinchuriki. True, they'd had a spy in their midst, but Kakashi wasn't convinced that this particular leak was Kyuu's work. Some part of the puzzle was missing. He just hoped it didn't mean that they had more than one spy in Konoha, especially someone with higher clearance or a longer history in their ranks. Watching the Sandame add notes surrounding a diagram, Kakashi felt his determination harden. He would not fail in this mission. The enemy had already invaded their home. He would not let them have his sensei's son as well. The information thereafter pertains to Naruto's location, then. The Sandame nodded, a deep frown on his face. There was a beat of silence and for a moment Kakashi thought the Hokage would stop there, but the old man elaborated. I sent Naruto to another dimension. Months ago I was astonished to find one of my old experiments come to life, a prototype for my looking glass that never properly worked. What astonished me most was that instead of viewing another place in this world I was seeing the same place in another potential world. I began conversing with the Hokage of that Konoha. Among other things, we discussed the possibility of sending objects through the glass. Purely as academic curiosity, at the time. I developed a seal specifically for that purpose, partly from my own curiosity and partly with the idea that if anything were to happen we could use that other world as a safe haven. Using that seal, I sent Naruto through to the other world where the enemy would not be able to reach him. Sarutobi pulled a large blank scroll closer to himself. He carefully drew out an intricate seal over the whole surface. When he was finished he spun the scroll around and pushed it in front of Kakashi for inspection. This is the seal I used to send Naruto through the glass, the Sandame continued, returning to making the decoy scroll. I buried the same seal into Naruto's subconscious with instructions to return when I have told him that it is safe to do so. Kakashi shifted as he let his Sharingan rove over the seal, analyzing, dissecting, memorizing it. How can you be sure he is safe in this other world? He asked with an uneasy tone. He didn't want Naruto in the village with everything that had been happening, but he didn't like the idea of entrusting the boy to strangers either. He is in good hands there, the Sandame said. The old man's voice conveyed a wealth of emotion. Kakashi was sure there was more than was being told to him. He was tempted to ask, but held himself back as a shadow passed over Sarutobi's face. However, I believe the enemy has discovered the looking glass where it was stored in the lower levels of the tower. Why else would they be so desperate to obtain the information as to risk their spy? Kakashi nodded. He had to agree, and if the enemy did know about the device that the Hokage used, then they would be one step closer to getting to Naruto. It was essential they did not get the information on how to travel through the glass. The full gravity of the situation settled in Kakashi's chest. This was one mission he could not fail. Tearing through the rubble of his village, Kakashi felt the same determination from the earlier conversation harden like steel. He noted the distance he had traveled since leaving the temporary headquarters. Though he didn't know the precise position of the lines at the moment, he knew that he'd be passing into enemy territory soon. However, the thought of stopping and turning around never entered into his mind. As he'd noted before in his meeting with the Hokage, failure was not an option on this mission. If he stopped, it would be because he was dead. Looking up, Kakashi could see the Hokage tower quickly approaching, which meant he was behind the enemy lines. Making extra care to continue on silently, he mentally prayed that no one had noticed his entrance or his passing, at least until he caught the paper and returned to a safe area. XXXXX. The room was filled with hushed voices and shifting bodies as the tower staff and the Jounin commanders waited for their Hokage to begin. Minato eyed the group. Normally, he would try to be more approachable, smile and talk with those he knew well, but today he wanted to emphasize his position of Hokage and the respect that went along with it. His more serious demeanor was in part due to the reaction he had received from the council and village elders. They had been skeptical and, in some cases, expressed outright denial over the possibility that his son could have survived. He hadn't thought he'd need the blood work Tsunade had done, but the elders had proved him wrong on that account. The very thought of it brought a slight scowl to his face. Hopefully, his attitude would also encourage the staff to stop gossiping about their leader. He waited several more minutes, giving the stragglers a chance to slip through the door and pretend they were there the entire time. "I've called this meeting to discuss a somewhat serious and complicated matter," Minato began, gaze sweeping across the crowd of Jounin and staff assembled before him. "Many of you have probably heard and perhaps even seen a boy with a surprising likeness to myself." There was a ripple of movement through the staff gathered in the room, and Minato knew that they knew exactly who he was talking about. "I feel I should clear up any confusion surrounding this rumor. First, let me say the boy is my son, Naruto." Whispers, and even some gasps, broke out in the back of the room at the revelation, mainly among the civilian employees present. Minato could see the questions already forming on several people's lips, so he continued, preemptively answering them. "This was the hard part. As many of you know, my son was reported as stillborn 8 years ago. However, that report was false. My son survived and I placed him into hiding as a protection against the perpetrators of the attack. He's growing up, though, and cannot spend his entire life hidden away from his home village. So I have decided to bring him home to stay with me." The whispering had now spread throughout the entire assembly, civilians and shinobi alike. Minato allowed the shock and surprise to settle for a few moments before speaking again. "If any of you have questions about the validity of my claim, Tsunadesima has the results of the blood work for your perusal, should you need it." Next to him, Tsunade brandished a scroll, unrolling it enough to show its contents were indeed the results from a blood test. Whether it was due to Minato's slightly frosty tone or Tsunade's scowl, no one stepped forward to question the Hokage's claim due to curiosity or political aspirations. "This is considered an ranked secret," Minato continued, "though I've brought Naruto out of hiding, I do not want other villages to know about him, yet. In fact, the longer it takes for word to get out the better. So, if you have been talking about this matter," several people ducked their heads or shifted from one foot to the other in embarrassment. "Or have heard anyone talking about it, kindly inform them it is classified for the time being." "Hokage-sama," one staff member spoke up from the midst of the crowd, raising a hand to be seen. Minato recognized him as the senior instructor in charge of the academy. "Will your son be attending school next year? He should be 8 now, am I correct?" Minato nodded, acknowledging his question. "That's a little far off to plan just now. We'll see how things develop and how well he adjusts to his new situation." "But where have you been keeping him?" another voice came from the back of the group. Somewhere very safe, Minato said, hedging the question. Thank you for your time, I'm sure you all have other things you need to be doing. The crowd bowed and began to disperse, a slow trickle out of the room. Shikaku came through the crowd, bowing slightly as he drew near, and Minato gestured him forward. Hokage-sama, how did you injure your hands? The Nara asked with a subdued tone, just audible over the shifting and talking of the group as people left the room. Minato didn't let any reaction touch his face. He had been wondering if anyone would have the nerve to ask. There'd been almost as many stares and whispers concerning his bandaged hands as there had been speculating as to the meeting's purpose. It wasn't too surprising that Shikaku asked. Telling Shikaku and, in turn everyone in hearing distance, that he'd injured his hands trying to control the Kyuubi's chakra as it used his son as a focal point to recoalesce was unthinkable. So Minato did the next best thing. He lied. I was working on an experiment last night and it got out of hand. I have already had them looked at and they are basically fine, and will heal completely with time. That's very good to hear, Hokage-sama. Shikaku's bright, intelligent eyes surveyed the damaged arms and Minato's face. Minato looked back with an expression carved from stone. He could tell that the Nara clan leader knew he was lying, but Shikaku was loyal and, more importantly, knew how keeping confidence and maintaining face in a hidden village worked. He would not tell anyone his suspicions, not that he had much to tell in the first place. All he knew was that Minato did not injure his arms in an experiment. What could become troublesome was that Minato was lying about more than just the origin of his wounds. While he was basically healed and could use his arms and hands to mold chakra and perform jutsu, he was also far from recovered. His arms hurt if he used them too much or too fast. Lifting heavy loads was next to impossible, too, and according to Tsunade the symptoms could go on for days or even weeks. There was just no telling when the remnant of Kyuubi's chakra would work its way out of its system. Given more information, Shikaku might be able to figure out more, but Minato wasn't going to allow that to happen. He nodded his thanks for the concern and, turning from the still crowded room, Minato headed toward the door. Turning the corner to move toward his office, Minato breathed a sigh of relief. That was one less thing for him to worry about, but the ones that remained were too many to count. XXXXX Naruto felt better than he had in days. He had almost a full night's sleep, staying in bed late that morning after the nightmare and subsequent checkup and talk. When Minato had taken him back to his room, they found Kakashi and Rin plastering his walls with seals. When he'd asked what they were for, the silver-haired man replied in that bored tone without batting an eye. They're magic symbols to keep bad dreams away. Really? Naruto had gasped, looking at the square bits of paper lining the wall with a new eye. The symbols looked like regular seals to him, though he couldn't tell what type. They hadn't even come close to breaching the topic in the academy. He just barely caught Rin rolling her eyes at Kakashi's explanation. Either way, Naruto didn't care. Whether they were magical symbols or just regular seals, they had done the job, and Naruto didn't have a single nightmare until he woke late the next morning. Even as he moved around the house he felt better, less frustrated and annoyed with everything. The slightly restless feeling was still there, like he was waiting for something that he couldn't remember. The itching in the back of his skull was still there, too, but it was easier to stand. Naruto spent the rest of the morning helping Kakashi make a grocery list, mainly reminding the silver-headed man to add more instant ramen. After lunch Naruto retreated to his room to begin planning his prank on the taciturn man. That was where Rin found him almost an hour later. "Here you are," Rin said as she eased open the door. "I was wondering if I was going to have to hunt you down again." She grimaced slightly at the thought. Naruto grinned, one hand going to the back of his head. "Sorry about that, Rin-san." Rin just chuckled. "As long as I don't have to go through a gauntlet like that again. You're a handful, you know that." She cautiously stepped into the room, stopping not too far from the door and leaning against the wall. "What are you doing in here all alone?" An edge of suspicion entered her tone and she eyed the room around her as if expecting a can of paint to drop from nowhere. Naruto hesitated saying anything. After all, he'd never shared his pranks with anyone else, but then again, he'd never had anyone to share them with in the first place. Suddenly, he wanted someone else to be in on the joke, to laugh with him when he managed to pull it off and get Kakashi. Still, he wasn't sure if Rin would be the right choice. She hadn't liked his pranks before, but that might have been because she'd gotten caught in all of them. Minato was at work and Kakashi was gone shopping for grocery supplies, not that he'd be able to tell Kakashi since he was Naruto's next target in the first place. So that left Rin. Naruto eyed the kunoichi in front of him. She could be fun sometimes, and if he promised not to get her then maybe she would help. Actually, I'm planning a prank for Kakashi. Naruto-kun, you know what, Minato. Rin started but stopped halfway through her protest, eyes narrowing just slightly. You're planning it for Kakashi? Yeah. I mean, Dad said I could, Naruto added in the last part quickly, wanting to make sure Rin understood he had permission. The kunoichi was quiet for a moment, but the slowly growing grin on her face and distant look in her eyes made Naruto believe that she wasn't worrying over him breaking the na-prank rule. She looked down at Naruto sitting on his bed, scribbles of possible ideas scattered around him on scrap paper drawn in crayon. Think you might want some help? Rin asked, the grin on her face huge and devious. Naruto looked at her, surprised for a moment, before an equally large and devious grin spread across his. He nodded vigorously, excited by the prospect of sharing his awesome prank with someone and feeling lighter than he had since the attack in the old Konoha. Yeah, Databeo. His words seemed to throw Rin off for a moment as she stared at him in vague shock, but then the grin was back. Tussling his hair, Rin chuckled, just like your mother. The comment made Naruto's heart skip a beat. His mother? Something about him was just like his mother? He knew he looked just like his dad, that was obvious to anyone with eyes, but it hadn't occurred to him that he didn't know anything about his mother. A sudden desire to know her swept through him. What was she like? What was her name? Where had she gone? Rin sat down on the edge of the bed, scooping up the sketched ideas and looking them over with that same devious expression. Now that he had someone to plan and enjoy the prank with, Naruto didn't want to distract himself asking questions, but privately he promised himself to ask his dad the moment he got a chance. These are good, Rin said, shuffling through the papers and putting some on top of the stack. But I'll tell you the secret to a great trap. Rin's voice dropped low and she leaned toward Naruto as if in preparation for telling him a guarded secret. The secret to laying a great trap as opposed to just a good one is knowing your opponent's weakness. XXXXX Minato came home early from work that night. He left soon after his staff meeting, only partially sneaking past his secretary to avoid any mention of the as yet unfinished paperwork on his desk. He remembered the Sandaime complaining about the constant pressure to win the paper war but hadn't experienced it himself until recently. He could only say his new awareness of it was thanks to his equally new desire to be home. Tonight Minato had a particularly good reason for leaving early, office work finished or unfinished, in case anyone confronted him. He needed to finish placing seals around the house for security. Of course, no one was to know that he was primarily securing Naruto against absorbing too much of the Kyuubi's chakra at once, but he doubted anyone would wonder too deeply about the Hokage placing additional security around his recently returned son. Kakashi had plastered Naruto's bedroom with the temporary seal suppressants already, but it was a temporary fix. They needed something more permanent and to withstand the Kyuubi's corrosive chakra. Minato had spent a large part of his lunch combining barrier and chakra suppressant seals and then fine-tuning the new seal specifically to keep the Kyuubi's chakra at bay. The Kyuubi's chakra was unique and he was sure that he would be able to stop it from entering the house and suppress any already in the structure without unduly affecting his own or anyone else's. He'd also drawn up more regular suppressant seals to keep on hand at all times, just in case. The new seal should allow Naruto to move freely through the house and sleep without nightmares, but it was still just a temporary measure. Minato didn't know how well the seal would work without a physical barrier as well, and he was hesitant to put Naruto in danger to try it out on open ground, which meant his energetic son was still confined indoors. Kakashi and Rin would not be happy about that, much less Naruto himself, especially when they'd just given a credible explanation to the village about Naruto's presence. Dropping down onto his front steps, Minato tried to lighten the thoughtful frown on his face. He didn't want to worry Naruto. The boy didn't know about the Kyuubi as far as Minato could tell, and he was fine maintaining this ignorance for as long as possible. He remembered the weight Kushina had to bear when she was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, and he wanted his son free of that same weight for as long as possible. He didn't know, specifically, if ignorance would help, but he was willing to try it with both the village and Naruto for as long as he could manage. Opening the door, Minato set the notes for his new seal and the stack of suppressant seals down while he removed his sandals. "I'm home," he called, a brief but genuine smile lighting his face as he remembered what it was like to have someone to yell that to, but the announcement was met with silence. Frowning now in confusion as well as a small amount of suspicion, Minato paused. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. He looked inside the sitting room to find it empty as well as the kitchen and the entire first floor. The more rooms Minato entered, the more cautious he became, very well aware of the one prank deal that he had made with his son. Naruto was supposed to be targeting Kakashi, but there were no guarantees. By the time Minato reached the stairs, he was feeling downright paranoid. He ascended the stairs slowly, ready to move at a moment's notice and only briefly reflecting how on the absurdity of his situation. Naruto was an 8-year-old, hardly a threat to a ninja as experienced as Minato, but the possibility that said 8-year-old had managed to booby-trap some part of the house was entirely real, and that was enough for him. Minato found Naruto and Rin in the boys' room. He heard their low voices carrying through the door before he saw them, knocking a few times before pushing the door open. Naruto and Rin both froze, looking up at the door with wide eyes. They both caught sight of Minato and sagged in relief. "You're home early," Rin said with an innocent smile. Minato stopped at the bright tone and face. It threw him for a loop, and for a moment all he could do was blink at the woman in his son's room as Naruto nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Minato started but interrupted himself. He didn't want Naruto to know about the Kyuubi or the need for seals everywhere at the moment. "I had some chores to get done, so I came home." "What are you two doing up here?" "Oh, well." Rin started. Beside her, Naruto opened his mouth, undoubtedly to proclaim whatever scheme the two of them had begun, but Rin clamped a hand over his mouth. "It's a surprise," she said finally, with a nod and a smile. That didn't make Minato feel any better as he looked from Rin's innocent smile to Naruto's growing mischievous one. "Please let them be." Planning something for Kakashi, Minato prayed silently. "Well, I'll be downstairs." "All right, sensei," Rin said, not so subtly urging Minato out the door. "Right," Minato said, hesitant to ask more. The door snapped shut in his face and he blinked for a moment at the wood planks. "Please let it be for Kakashi," he murmured again as he turned away and headed back downstairs. Stopping briefly at his office to pick up his sealing ink, Minato made his way downstairs. He decided to start at the corner of the house in the kitchen. He would work his way around the outer wall, placing seals at regular intervals to prevent the Kyuubi's chakra from seeping into the house. Then, he would do the same for the upper level, as well. Minato set up the finished seal he had created and began the careful process of copying it precisely. He moved slowly and rechecked his work constantly, not willing to risk making a mistake. He had just finished the first seal and was checking over for any errors when Kakashi entered the room, carrying bags of groceries. "Welcome home, sensei," Kakashi said, setting the groceries on the table and pulling them out of their bags. Minato looked over at a bag filled only with instant cup ramen and glanced at Kakashi. Don't tell me, Naruto helped write the grocery list. More like badgered me about ramen while I wrote the grocery list, Kakashi corrected. At the time it seemed like a good way to shut the kid up, but now I think I'm going to have to deal with Rin. At least I didn't get as much as your kid wanted in the first place. Minato chuckled and turned back to the drying seal on the wall. He's so much like his mother, he said quietly, wistfully. Is that the new seal you were going to make? Kakashi asked, his abrupt change of topics not going unnoticed by Minato. He abandoned the groceries on the table and stepped next to his sensei to better examine the finished seal. Yes, Minato said, stowing away the surge of nostalgia that had threatened to take hold. If it does what it's supposed to, it'll only suppress the Kyuubi's chakra as opposed to just any chakra, leaving us free to use jutsu if needed and practice with Naruto if we so choose. That's if I've gotten everything correct on the first try. I want you and Rin to carry around chakra suppressants, just in case, until we know if and how well this thing works. Kakashi nodded, picking up the version written on the scroll. He pushed up his headband, revealing his Sharingan eye and looked over every detail of the scroll. When I'm finished with the groceries, I'll help place them around the wall. Minato nodded his thanks only to grimace when Kakashi continued. The silver-haired man had turned back to the table and didn't see the gesture. It's a good thing Rin is keeping Naruto busy. It'll make this much easier without any interruptions. Minato turned back to the seal still waiting to be activated and bit his lip. He thought about the two upstairs and Naruto's devious smile and wondered if he should warn Kakashi. He didn't really think Naruto would manage to pull anything over on the Kapinin, but Rin was helping him. That changed things. Shaking his head, Minato dismissed any ideas about warnings. It would help keep Kakashi on his toes. As if summoned by the thought, pattering footsteps made their way down the upstairs hallway and down the staircase. A moment later Naruto appeared in the room, his eyes landing on Kakashi immediately and a smile flashed across his face. Rin appeared a moment later at a more sedate pace. She brushed past Naruto and sat down at the kitchen table after pouring herself a drink. "Oh, you're finally back," Rin said. "Yeah, you took forever," Naruto added, following Rin's example and sitting down at the table. His smile widened a little more when he saw the bag of ramen and he pulled it toward him, examining the flavors present. However, even while perusing the ramen, Naruto's eyes kept coming up to find Kakashi. Well, at least it isn't me, Minato thought to himself watching the two figures at the table. Whatever they were planning, apparently they were expecting it soon. Rin was fighting a grin as she sipped her water and Naruto didn't bother to hide his, though whether it was for an anticipated prank or the ramen now sitting directing in front of him was difficult to determine. Minato was happy to see the grin on Naruto's face was more carefree, happier and wider than it had been the last several days, maybe since Naruto first came. Blocking the Kyuubi's chakra had done wonders. Kakashi seemed to notice the attention from the two as well and he stopped midway through picking up groceries to put away in the cupboards. "What's wrong with you two?" he asked, eyeing each one suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" Naruto asked, the picture of innocence on his face. "Really, Kakashikin," Rin said, rolling her eyes, "you're getting paranoid in your old age." Kakashi hummed, moving to the cupboards to put away the canned goods. He paused a moment, frowning back at the two at the table, then slid his gaze over to Minato a moment before turning back to the cupboard. Behind Kakashi's back, Minato could see both Rin and Naruto tense just slightly in anticipation. Kakashi wrenched the cupboard door open and sprang back, ready for anything but what happened, which was nothing. A minute passed by and still nothing happened, making the silver-haired ninja drop his shoulders and chuckle in embarrassment. He moved back to the cupboard, reaching up to put away the canned bean sprouts. "Ma, from the way you two were acting I was sure you'd done some," bang. The confetti exploded out of the cupboard, dousing Kakashi in strips of paper as he stood frozen with his hand half extended. Naruto burst into laughter, slapping his hand on the table as Rin chuckled beside him. Minato laughed as well as, the exasperated look on Kakashi's face was priceless. Well, I guess you got me, Kakashi sighed, shaking his head and sending a cascade of paper to the floor. Though, I did know you were up to something, your element of surprise could do with a little work. Minato saw through it right away. Kakashi was trying to play the incident off as though it were nothing. Rin saw through it as well, since her eyes narrowed and the grin turned just a little more devious. Really, Kakashi? The emphasis in her tone and the continued grin on Naruto's face made Minato pause. There wasn't more to it, was there? Kakashi noticed it too, and again his eyes narrowed, switching between the two pranksters. He looked down at the paper strewn over the counter and froze. Minato could see his visible eye widen in horror, and he spun to face Rin and Naruto. You didn't. Didn't what? Rin asked, assumed innocence dripping from her tone. Naruto was too busy giggling beside her to put in his own comment, and Kakashi didn't wait for the boy to recover before tearing out of the kitchen. Minato could hear his footsteps pound up the stairs and down the hall toward the bedroom that he'd claimed for the time being. Now, Rin and Naruto were both laughing in earnest, and in Naruto's case, wiping tears of mirth from his eyes. What did you two do? Minato asked, unsure if he should laugh along with them or be concerned for Kakashi's horror-stricken expression. Just wait, sensei, you'll find out, Rin said, calming down enough to speak clearly. We really got him, Databeo. Naruto cheered, punching a fist in the air. Minato felt the breath catch in his throat but managed to keep the same expression on his face, even when Rin quickly glanced toward him with nervous eyes. A moment and a careful breath later he had complete control over himself again. It was surprising to find Naruto had the same verbal tic as his mother, and Minato wondered if the prolonged exposure to the Kyuubi's chakra had really affected Naruto so much that he was only just now feeling like himself. Besides that moment of shock, Minato realized he was happy for it. It was another way Kushina could be with them both. A horrified scream cut Minato's thoughts short as he looked up toward the second floor from where it originated. Rin and Naruto burst out in a new wave of laughter. Over the sound of their guffaws, Minato could make out thumping footsteps coming back down the hall and stairs returning to the kitchen. You did. I can't believe you two, he fumed, storming into the room and slamming a copy of his Ika Ika books down on the table. Except it wasn't a book, Minato realized. It was the cover of the book, the pages had all been removed. Glancing over to the confetti still on the counter and floor, it was easy to see where the innards of the books had gone. It wasn't quite fair to Kakashi. Minato knew how much those books meant to the silver-haired man, especially since Minato himself had put Naruto up to it, but despite himself, Minato huffed out a laugh. This isn't funny, sensei. Kakashi protested, sounding halfway to panic. The protest only made Minato laugh harder. It made Kakashi sound more like an indignant teenager than when the copynin had actually been a teenager. Rin had gained back enough breath to push herself upright again from her slouched position over the table. Don't worry, Kakashikin, she gasped, a few more chuckles escaping her, we didn't destroy your precious books, but that's not to say you'll have an easy time finding them. Kakashi groaned in frustration, renewing Naruto's dying giggles and making Minato laugh again. Minato wondered how long it would take Kakashi to find his collection again and if there were any extra surprises waiting for him there, as well. The moment of laughter was interrupted when a toad appeared before Minato, making everyone fall quiet. It had the telltale signs of empty Mayaboku, and though Minato had never seen this specific toad, he could easily tell that it belonged to Jiraiya. The creature didn't waste time speaking, it simply turned to the widest open space in the kitchen and spat out Jiraiya's bloody and beaten body onto the floor. Sensei! Minato cried, dropping down next to Jiraiya and checking on him. Rin was around the table and running glowing green hands over the old Sannin in an instant, brow furrowed in concentration. Minato could tell that Jiraiya was alive, thanks to the shallow lifts of the man's chest, and that he'd been badly beaten, but knew little else about his condition. At the other end of the room, Kakashi had already summoned one of his ninja dogs and sent him to get Tsunade. Minato vaguely wondered how many more times the woman could be called to his house for an emergency in 1 week. What happened to him? Naruto asked in shock. Minato looked up to find his son's wide, frightened eyes fixed on Jiraiya's body. Flicking his own gaze up, he found Kakashi and jerked his head toward the door. Kakashi nodded and took Naruto by the shoulder, guiding him away from the scene and out to the hallway. What happened? Naruto asked again, still looking over his shoulder. Is he going to be alright? We don't know what happened, Minato could hear Kakashi saying, but we're going to find out and Jiraiya's going to be fine. The man's more stubborn than you. The voices faded away into the hall and Minato looked back to Rin opening his mouth to demand an update. Rin cut him off, though, speaking without looking up from her work as blood leaked onto the floor. He's got several broken ribs, a cracked sternum, and some internal bleeding as well as a concussion and multiple contusions. I'm working to stop the internal bleeding but there's a lot of damage. Her voice was tight with concentration, a world's difference from the bright laughter that had filled it only minutes ago. Sensei, who could have done this? I don't know, Minato said, his own expression hard with determination. He immediately thought back to the man that they had seen through the mirror the last time they activated it, the man with the Rinnegan. He could do something like this, if he was as powerful as Jiraiya said. However, there was no guarantee that the same man was even alive in this world, so it was only supposition. The best they could hope for would be Jiraiya healing enough to wake and tell them the identity of his attacker. Even if that didn't happen, Minato would solve the mystery. But like Kakashi said, I intend to find out. XXXXX Tsunade arrived quickly, not commenting on once again being summoned to the Hokage's residence. She didn't bother saying anything to anyone. She pushed the table and chairs away, crashing them into the far wall. Then, she dropped down next to her friend, green hands already lit and scanning from his head down to the torso. I've stabilized most of the internal bleeding, Rin said, focusing on Jiraiya's lower torso. Tsunade grunted, concentrating on his chest. Minato watched the scene, anger boiling up inside him. It was disturbingly similar to how Kushina had looked when she died, exhausted from childbirth, in agony from the Kyuubi being ripped out of her, and covered in her own blood. He'd already lost his family once when Kushina and his Naruto died. He'd be damned if he lost it again. Tsunade scowled down at the bloody mess that was Jiraiya's chest. Damn it Minato, if you can't keep yourself in check then get the hell out. Blinking in surprise, Minato clamped down on his chakra. He tore his eyes away from Jiraiya and hurried out the door. The medical team needed to focus and he couldn't risk distracting them. In the hall, he let out a breath and turned, looking back at the kitchen door. Half of him still wished he was in the room so he could know how his mentor was doing and the other half was glad to be away from the nightmarish scene. Is he gonna be alright? Naruto asked, tugging on Minato's sleeve to get his attention. Minato looked down, tearing his eyes away from the door. Naruto stared up at him, eyes wide and face pale. Minato turned the boy around and ushered him farther down the hall, away from Tsunade and Rin's hurried voices. Kakashi followed, murmuring about checking the perimeter before disappearing into the background. Jiraiya's going to be fine, Minato said. He struggled to sound reassuring in the midst of his own doubt. Tsunade will fix him up. Then you can tell him all about pranking Kakashiken. Naruto didn't look convinced and Minato couldn't blame him. He'd never seen his sensei in such bad shape, though he'd heard about the time Tsunade caught the old pervert peeping. That was different, though. No matter what Jiraiya had done, Tsunade would never go far enough in a beating to definitely kill him or even attempt to do so. Whoever had beaten Jiraiya this time had definitely been trying to kill the man. Jiraiya's tough, Minato said, gripping Naruto's shoulder and staring back toward the kitchen. He wouldn't let something like this get the best of him. Minato wasn't sure if he was speaking more for Naruto's benefit or for his own. Shaking himself, Minato looked for something to distract Naruto. If he was lucky, then he would turn both their minds away from the kitchen and the drama unfolding inside. Latching on to his first thought, Minato said, "Did you know he's your godfather?" Naruto looked up at Minato, eyes torn away from the kitchen for the first time. "My godfather? What does that mean?" Minato slid down the wall until he sat on the floor. Naruto plopped down next to him and he wrapped an arm around the small boy. A godfather is like an adopted parent in some ways. They're supposed to look after you, teach you like your real parents. So Jiraiya's like a second dad? Naruto asked, face scrunched up at the idea. Phrased like that, Minato wasn't sure he liked it either. Well, more like an uncle. That you shouldn't really listen to half the time. At least about women. Or money. Or alcohol. Minato looked down at Naruto, regretting choosing this topic to talk about. You know what? Whatever Jiraiya tells you, check with me first before you act on it. Naruto's face was grave when he nodded in agreement. He is an old pervert. Minato huffed out a laugh, releasing some of the tension trapped inside him. You can say that again. He squeezed Naruto's shoulders in a quick hug. The gesture made the boy smile, but it faded away as a pensive expression appeared on his face. What is it? Minato asked. Earlier Rin said something. She said I was like my mother. Naruto glanced down at his hands before peering back up at Minato. I was wondering about her. Looking down at his son, Minato wished that Kushina was still there, if only because he'd never be able to stand up to those wide blue eyes. She would have been a much better disciplinarian. Minato melted too easily. Drawing in a deep breath, Minato looked beyond the far wall. Your mother's name was Uzumaki Kushina. She was the love of my life. Minato faltered, not sure what to say. This was more difficult than he thought it would be after so many years, especially when he'd already accepted his child's death and never thought he'd have this particular discussion. Do you have a picture? Naruto asked, and Minato didn't continue after a moment. Minato nodded. He had lots of pictures, all hidden away where he couldn't see them, couldn't stumble across them by accident. Come on. He pushed off of the floor and moved to the stairs. The nearest box of pictures sat in his office. He had shoved them in a back corner under a shelf like some form of contraband, unwilling and unable to throw them away but equally reluctant to look at them. The shelf was buried under piles of scrolls and books, as hidden from the world as the box of pictures itself. Digging out both was like an excavation, traveling back in time with each layer of documents removed. Naruto hovered behind him, looking around the room with a swiveling neck. Minato supposed the only 2 times the boy had been in the room he'd been too preoccupied to really notice it, the first time setting a trap and the second time getting yelled at for said trap. As long as Naruto didn't touch anything that would harm him, Minato didn't mind the boy looking. Reaching back farther than he remembered needing to, Minato's fingers finally brushed a dusty cardboard box. He strained a few moments, fingers fumbling for the box, touching it but unable to draw it closer. A finger snagged a tear in the corner of the cardboard and managed to pull it a fraction closer. From there, he was able to get a better hold on it and drag the box into the light. The dust was thick on the lid, matted and dense from time. Minato hoped the contents weren't damaged. It had been 8 years since he'd unburied these particular memories and they weren't stored in the most protective container. He turned around, settling into a comfortable spot on the floor against the bookshelf behind him. Patting the floor next to him, he silently invited Naruto to take a seat. Naruto dropped down, looking at the box in Minato's hands with keen interest. For a long moment they just stared at it. Part of Minato hesitated to open the box after such a long time. Naruto watched, twitching with impatience. The boy looked down at the box and reached on hand out to touch the lid. Minato placed the box in Naruto's lap after only a brief hesitation. The boy looked up at him and grinned before flipping the top off without any reservations. "Are these all of Mom?" Naruto asked, looking at the disorganized mound of pictures. "Most," Minato said, glad to see that the pictures looked undamaged. He reached into the box, pulling out a stack for closer inspection. On top was a picture of Kushina, her long hair as red as it remained in his memories. Studying it for a minute, Minato passed it over to Naruto. "That's your mother." Naruto stared at the picture for a moment, eyes wide in amazement. "She has really pretty hair," he said with the same awkwardness all boys had when trying to compliment girls, even their mothers. Minato chuckled. Kushina would have been happy to hear Naruto say that. "Yes," he agreed, "her hair was beautiful." "What happened to her?" Naruto asked, hand dipping into the box and drawing out another picture. It was of Kushina fluffing a younger Kakashi's hair. In the shot, Kakashi looked resigned, his hishiate pulled down over one eye. "She died," Minato said, torn between humor as he remembered the events of the picture and sorrow from his loss, saving the village. Naruto glanced toward the door and Minato guessed what he was thinking. "Jiraiya's not going to die yet," he said firmly. "He's too stubborn for that. Besides, he still has to make my life hell by introducing you to girls." Naruto looked up at him with a serious expression. "Girls are gross," he said, then added after a long pause, "except Sakurakin. She's not gross, though she can be a little scary sometimes." Minato chuckled. "Kushina could be scary, too," he said, almost to himself. "But don't let that fool you. Women have to have a tough exterior if they want to survive in the shinobi world. That doesn't mean they can't have a soft side, too. Just don't tell Tsunade I said that, alright?" Naruto nodded, looking back down at the mound of pictures. Minato replaced the stack he had pulled out, plucking up the pictures that Naruto held and putting them in the box, too. He slipped the cover back on and stood, taking the box with him. "Let's go downstairs and look through them in the sitting room. Then, Rin and Tsunade will be able to find us when they're done with Sensei." Naruto nodded, jumping to his feet and running out into the hall. Minato followed at a slower pace, locking and sealing the door behind him. There were enough pictures in the box to distract them until the medical ninja were done with what would hopefully be good news. XXXXX Kakashi was close. A few times he had almost caught the paper and he was now within grasping distance. He lunged forward, fingers brushing the very edge of the paper figure when something slammed into him from the side. The impact knocked him off course and the paper slipped through his fingers. Recovering from the surprise impact, Kakashi quickly realized that it was an enemy shinobi who had tackled him. Whether the man realized what he had done by attacking Kakashi at that precise moment or not, he was going to pay. Kakashi spun around in the other's grip, quickly breaking the enemy's hold and taking a more advantageous position. The other shinobi grunted, realizing that the scales of power had tipped as Kakashi attacked from behind. Somewhere during the grappling, Kakashi realized that the ninja he was fighting against was barely a man, several years younger than Kakashi himself. Not that this changed anything. The young man was also a ninja, invading another country and another ninja village. Every genin accepted the risk at a young age from the moment they accepted the hishiate of their village. Not to mention that because of this young man Kakashi had missed what was probably his best chance to stop the enemy from gaining potentially dangerous information. So, in short, Hatake Kakashi was pissed. Pulling out a kunai from the enemy's own pouch, Kakashi plunged it into the man's chest. He pushed against the other man's back, separating them as the enemy shinobi stumbled forward and Kakashi jumped back a few feet to land on his knees. He breathed heavily, almost spent from sleepless nights and exhausting days, but desperate to finish the fight and get back to the chase. Channeling a little lightning chakra into his blade, Kakashi leapt forward just as his opponent turned, thrusting his kunai through the man's heart. Kakashi didn't waste a step as he turned and sought the paper once again, but a cold sensation settled into his stomach. He'd lost too much distance. The altercation, mere seconds that it was, had cost him precious time and energy. Now, he didn't know how he could possibly catch up before it reached the Hokage Tower, looming above the rubble around him. As if to emphasize the point, Kakashi's legs suddenly gave out on him, collapsing under his weight. He dropped like a stone to the ground, landing on his hands and knees, panting as he felt the weakness of chakra exhaustion eating away at him. Kakashi cursed, looking up just in time to see the white speck of paper disappear into a tower window. He slammed his fist into the ground, only avoiding injury to his hand due to the weakness that coursed through him. He'd failed. Kakashi couldn't accept that he'd failed. There had to be something more he could do. Groaning, Kakashi pushed himself over onto his back. He could feel blackness encroaching on his vision but stayed conscious by sheer force of will. Looking around, he found an overhang formed by several walls and slabs of concrete that had fallen over in the street. It was low to the ground and hidden from prying eyes. Gritting his teeth with effort, Kakashi dragged himself to the cover, rolling under the rubble with the dregs of his energy. The last thing he registered was coming to a stop against the inside corner before the shadows closed in and the world went dark and silent. XXXXX Pain looked over the information Conan's paper message had brought him. He studied every line and diagram with a careful eye. Their spy had sacrificed himself to obtain this information and he didn't plan to let that sacrifice go to waste. While he wasn't concerned about the loss of a man, he did regret the loss of a valuable information source. However, if the information provided proved enough, then the benefit would be well worth the cost. Even with a cursory inspection, Pain could tell that much of the provided information was false. However, in traps like this, a skilled shinobi buried accurate information in with the false. It just took a careful eye to spot it. After all, spies could generally smell a trap when the bait was nonsensical, but truth mixed in with lies could make a trap sweet enough to catch flies. The tricky part was discerning the difference between the two. Studying the information, it was clear Konoha didn't realize that Pain had two other sources to draw from in his possession. Before him, he had the fragment of a scroll, too small to be any use on its own, but when combined with the information recently gained it was enough to differentiate fact from fiction in several places. Then, Pain also had his own observations from the brief moment that he'd seen the mirror activated. It was both more and less helpful than the half-destroyed scrap he had found. Analyzing the chakra paths told a great deal about how the mirror worked, but it was only raw data. It needed analysis and in some cases leaps of logic to make connections between the raw chakra paths. With the notes he'd drawn out and the set of polished information stolen by his spy, chakra paths could tell how much chakra was needed for a technique, but not the precise hand signs or seals used in a technique. It was an outline with no detail. From the information spread out before him, Pain thought he would be able to open the portal himself and perhaps send over chakra, but sending or bringing physical objects through was still out of his grasp. In theory, he could bring the Kyuubi to the other side of the mirror and drain its chakra through the mirror, but that was impractical. There was no place immediately available to store the massive amount of chakra and, more importantly, there was no way to guarantee their control over the other end of the portal for the time needed to drain all of the chakra. No, the best option would be to bring the Kyuubi's container back through and keep him somewhere secure until they needed to extract the bijou. That meant working out a way to bring solid, living things over from the other side. Pain knew he could figure out a way to do it with the information before him and some testing of his own, but it would take time, something they were short on as the IWA forces continued to be pushed back and his faction lost their own advantage with the capture of their spy. Pulling a blank sheet of paper toward him, Pain drew out the symbols he believed would activate the mirror. He'd seen the other Hokage begin the deactivation sequence, giving him a good starting point for the activation sequence. That information served as a base which he coupled with knowledge gleaned from the intel gathered before him. Added with sources from what remained of the Hokage's private library, he began working on a possible method to move physical material from one place to another. After hours of theoretical calculation, he developed a possible solution. On paper, it seemed possible, but it was only theory, and an incomplete one at that. He was at the point where he needed some practical application of his experiments to continue. Pain stood from his place at the Hokage's old desk and moved into the hallway. He navigated through the damaged and ruined corridors, down the half-destroyed staircases and into the lowest levels of the tower. The two guards positioned by the mirror room let him pass without comment when they saw who it was. The mirror room was in the same state of disarray as when they first broke in, but the mirror itself had been cleaned and cleared of all debris. It stood reflecting the damaged world around it without a scratch from the traps and protections laid by the Sandaime. Pain examined it again, checking over the entire surface and the surrounding floor once more. He sent an experimental chakra surge through the crystal, receiving the same reaction as earlier. Stepping back, he began the first-hand sign sequence that he thought might open the portal. The chakra balance was critical when dealing with the mirror. Such a large crystal required a great deal of chakra channeled through it for activation, but couldn't take any variation in the power level at risk of shattering the glass, meaning the user must exercise utmost control and a precise sequence of signs. The crystal flashed and hummed with vibration, but the light died almost as soon as it appeared and returned to its blank-faced dormant state. Pain tried a second possible sequence of hand signs, then a third, and a fourth. The flashes of light grew brighter and longer, the vibrations hummed through the silent room. On the fourth attempt he thought he saw shadows moving in the glass that didn't exist in his room. Thinking carefully, Pain considered each sign, its position, the sign preceding it, and the sign following it. This time he attempted to look at the combination with fresh eyes, assuming nothing from the earlier attempts, taking nothing for granted. Questioning his own logic at each step, Pain narrowed the problems down. Eventually, he was fairly confident that the most likely issue was with the last two signs. He changed them to a more stable combination and ran through the symbols again. This time, the mirror flashed, as though it were catching the glint of the sun. When the light faded, traveling down to the very bottom of the mirror and disappearing altogether, he found himself staring into a similar room in the tower's lower levels, but at the same time a room which was entirely different. The reflected room was clean and whole, containing an ANBU guard that faced the mirror with katana drawn. "Who are you?" the ANBU demanded, stance ready for anything. Pain didn't bother answering. Instead, he drew out a scroll and began a more accurate chakra diagram of the activated looking glass. When finished, he stepped up closer to the glass and rested a finger against it. Probing, he sent a low stream of chakra into the glass and observed the reaction. The looking glass was solid, like a closed window. The barrier that prevented crossing between the two worlds consisted of both chakra and the physical material that made up the crystal. To send something over or bring something through it, he would need to negate both barriers. Satisfied, Pain stepped back and ran through the hand signs to deactivate the mirror. It took 2 attempts, as he needed to slightly adjust his initial patterns, but now he had a much clearer understanding of how the mirror worked. Pain turned from the mirror, scroll in hand. He had more work to do. XXXXX Minato surveyed the young shinobi before him. Uchiha Itachi was one of the very few active duty members left in his clan. An internal dispute within the Uchiha clan several years ago had culminated into what could only be described as civil war. Tensions between the clan and the village that ran back as far as the time of the Shodai Hokage sparked an internal divide amongst the Uchiha as to whether they should remain with the village or separate. In the end, the question of secession turned family members against one another as the proud clan refused to publicize their internal dispute to the rest of the village and sought to resolve the issue without aid. It was one of the greatest regrets of Minato's tenure as Hokage and also the main reason he began experimenting with the Sandame's seeing glass. The shock of being woken in the middle of the night to find the members of one of Konoha's oldest clans slaughtering each other over an undecided future was almost as bad as facing a loosed Kyuubi. It took all the Anbu in the village as well as himself and many Jounin to finally stop the violence. In the end, many of the Uchiha Shinobi died or were injured too gravely to continue their ninja careers. Of those Uchiha who remained, more supported the village than not, much like the young Itachi, and were eventually allowed to return to active duty in a limited capacity. It had been difficult to convince the majority of the village that the remaining Uchiha were trustworthy, but after a long and careful PR campaign through the joint efforts of Minato and Uchiha Shursui, the clan gained guarded acceptance and members were finally beginning to return to the Konoha shinobi ranks. It was in part due to Shursui's recommendation that Itachi was standing before Minato now. Shursui hoped that when others saw the Hokage assign Uchiha important missions again it would help affirm the clan's trustworthiness. Minato too hoped that by putting Itachi in this role he would show both the villagers and the diminished clan that the Uchiha were still a valued and important asset to Konoha. "I'm sure you heard the recent rumors concerning my son," Minato began after a brief moment. Itachi remained impassive. "Hi, Hokage-sama. As you've been informed, my son's existence and presence in the village is a confidential matter. The longer it takes for word to get out about my son the better." Minato hesitated. He knew if he was going to have the young shinobi help guard Naruto, then Itachi would have to know the truth about the dangers he could potentially face. Itachi had proven his loyalty to the village time and time again, most notably when forced to choose between his own parents and the safety of the village. Minato had no doubts about his loyalty, but still revealing Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki made him uncomfortable. "There is also something else. This is an SS-class secret. I know you understand what that means. Naruto is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki." Itachi's only noticeable reaction was a slight widening of the eyes, but Minato could tell the man was listening to every word he said and the gravity of the revelation was not lost on him. "Naruto himself is not aware of this fact and it will be kept from him until I determine the time is right to tell him. That fact is also part of the reason I decided to add you to the protection detail. It is a possibility that he may lose control of the Kyuubi's chakra. The Sharingan is known for being able to suppress and control the Bijou. If a situation occurs you, in particular, may be able to restrain the Kyuubi's chakra." Minato silently prayed that this would not be required, but for the protection of everyone involved they needed as many safeguards as possible. "Is that how you hurt your hands, Hokage-sama?" Itachi inquired. The young shinobi didn't generally ask questions, but when he did they were direct and straight to the point. Minato watched Itachi for a moment. It was a balancing act, knowing just how much information to entrust to others while trying to maintain a maximum level of security. Minato nodded once. "Yes, I was injured by the Kyuubi's chakra. Much of the Kyuubi's chakra dispersed when it was briefly released 8 years ago. That chakra has been recentering around my son as he is the largest concentration of it and is thereby acting as a focal point. The situation has been remedied for the time being. We're keeping him inside a safe zone, warded from any latent chakra by a seal I designed. You'll also be issued chakra suppressants to carry on you at all times in case those seals fail. Hatake Kakashi and Noara Rin are currently assigned to the same mission and also carry chakra suppressants with them." Itachi nodded in understanding. "What are the limits of the safe zone?" "I've placed the seal along the walls of my home. Naruto should be safe from the Kyuubi's dispersed chakra while he remains inside, however until I find a better solution he cannot the building, especially for long periods of time." Minato didn't know how long it would take for Naruto to feel the effects if he left the house. It had been several days before they became noticeable the first time, but that could have been due to Minato's own unfamiliarity with the situation. Naruto had suffered nightmares every night before the seals were put in place, after all. Minato's thoughts wandered to Jiraiya, still unconscious and under Tsunade's care. His sensei was an expert in espionage and covert operations. Minato seriously doubted Jiraiya would let anyone gain knowledge they should not have, especially concerning Naruto, but they still didn't know what had happened to him and needed to take precautions. There may also be the possibility of other villages making an attempt to secure Naruto for the Kyuubi. I doubt I need to emphasize for you the importance of this mission, Minato said, his expression deadly serious. You must be prepared for danger, either from your ward or for actions your ward, at all times. I understand, Hokage-sama, Itachi said. His face was devoid of emotion, but determination burned in his eyes. Between rebuilding the clan's trust, protecting the village and the remnants of his family, Minato knew Itachi bore a heavy burden on his shoulders and he would do whatever was necessary to fulfill his duty. Satisfied, Minato nodded. He reached into his desk and pulled out a sealed scroll. Give this to Kakashi when you get to the house. And be careful of booby traps. Naruto has a fondness for setting them in inconvenient places. Itachi didn't react and Minato tried to imagine how the serious young ninja would react to opening a cabinet door and getting a face full of confetti, but failed. He handed the scroll over just as an urgent knock came to the door. Forming a few hand signs, he released the security seals around the door. Come in. The ANBU captain set to guard the looking glass was already halfway into the room. Minato's eyes narrowed, his shoulders tensing. He nodded to Itachi, thank you, you're dismissed. The Uchiha nodded, bowed, and moved out the door, eyes only glancing at the ANBU as the guard hurried through a bow. Hokage-sama, there's been an incident. XXXXX Kakashi didn't know how long he had been unconscious. When he came to, he was stiff, sore, in pain, and still exhausted. He was alive, though, and as long as he was alive he could still do something to fix the situation. The problem was what? Shifting slightly to get into a more comfortable position, Kakashi considered his situation and his options. He was behind enemy lines, by a fair distance considering how close the Hokage Tower had been the last time he saw it. There was a dead enemy soldier not too far away which could potentially tip off his presence and lead to his discovery. He was alone and injured with no realistic hope for rescue. Undoubtedly, by now the Hokage was aware of what had happened with the spy and that he hadn't returned from his pursuit of the message. Kakashi was sure that the others would assume he had failed, had most likely been killed, and that the information in the diversionary scroll had been secured by the enemy. Kakashi wasn't sure what the direct consequences of the information leak would be. The information in the scroll had been altered from the original for an occasion just like this. However, like the Hokage said, there were enough elements of truth to still be dangerous, especially if the enemy had another source of information to reference. Their end goal was to capture Naruto. The war effort as a whole wasn't in immediate danger, the operation could even be considered a success since they had captured the spy, but Naruto certainly was in danger. So what could Kakashi do? No matter what he chose, Kakashi knew he would need to rest first, so immediate action was out of the question. Moving painfully, he pulled out an emergency ration from his pouch and crunched down on it, determined to regain as much strength as he could. Even with the sleep he'd just gotten, Kakashi was dangerously close to chakra exhaustion. Days of fighting at the start of the invasion and the last several days rooting out the spy left little time to rest and rebuild his strength. His reserves were dangerously low and left him short on both physical strength and chakra. Lying still again, he ran through each possible course of action he could take. The first option Kakashi thought of was returning to his own lines. He could make his way back, report to the Hokage so the old man would know exactly what had happened and take measures to counter it instead of acting upon assumptions and guesswork. By doing so, Kakashi would be able to get medical help, rest, and eventually rejoin the fighting. However, it would also mean leaving the enemy free to pursue Naruto. The second option was less practical, more dangerous, and less likely to succeed. Knowing the probable motivation of the enemy, Kakashi was sure he could find another way to stop them from reaching Naruto. Gaining the information to reach the boy was only the first step in the process. Even if Kakashi had failed to prevent the enemy from gaining the information, the ultimate goal of the operation had been to capture the spy and protect Naruto. They had captured the spy, now he just needed to ensure that Naruto was safe by disrupting any of the other steps the enemy needed to take in getting to Naruto. If Kakashi decided to follow that second option, it meant he would need to remain behind enemy lines, even go further into enemy territory and sneak into the enemy-held and fortified Hokage Tower. It would mean delaying much-needed medical attention, rest, and probably end with his death. However, if he succeeded, Naruto would be safe. Steeling himself for the challenges ahead, Kakashi crunched down on another emergency ration. He wriggled his canteen up and took a few sips and debated the merit and dangers of attempting a nap. He only one way which was certain to keep the enemy from getting to Naruto, and it would take all that he had to accomplish it. If he destroyed the gateway, then no one would be able to reach Naruto. Granted, it would mean no foreseeable way to bring the boy back to their side, but if it kept Naruto safe, then there might not be any better option. When he was ready and prepared, he would set out again, this time to destroy the Hokage's looking glass. And he hasn't returned? Sarutobi confirmed, clamping his jaw down on his pipe. Of course Kakashi hadn't returned. If he had, then he would be reporting himself rather than Shikaku, who was standing before the Hokage with worried expression. How long ago did he start his chase? Over 12 hours ago. He may have crossed over to enemy territory during his pursuit, in which case he most likely is in need of assistance. If he is even still alive, Sarutobi said, voicing what Shikaku hadn't. They all knew it was a possibility, but losing Kakashi would be a heavy blow against their fighting forces and morale. Many of the younger ninja in the village looked up to Kakashi. Few knew him on a truly personal level, but all knew and respected his reputation, and all of the upper-level ninja trusted his skills and judgment. Kakashi is extremely resourceful, Shikaku said, but they both were familiar with the reality of war. Sometimes resourcefulness just wasn't enough. Assemble several long-range surveillance experts, Sarutobi said, glaring down at the battle map of Konoha, specifically at the lines separating the Konoha and AIM forces. I want them positioned along the most likely routes Kakashi took and where the information would be brought. The Hokage Tower seems to be their current headquarters. The Hokage nodded in agreement. Have a team ready should the surveillance pick up any indication he's still alive or needs help. Shikaku looked down at the map, studying the fronts and controlled areas in the village. Asuma has successfully retaken the main and northwestern gate from the IWA forces. It has limited the area they control inside the city and weakened their other positions. We could draw a team from there and redirect it toward the rescue effort. Be sure they get some rest if at all possible, Sarutobi said. Alert me if there is any movement or changes inside the AIM-controlled territory. Hi, Hokage-sama. Shikaku bowed and left the room, another wave of shinobi bearing reports rushing through the door as he left. Sarutobi received the news from the front lines, allowing it to pile up on his desk. They were beginning to turn the battle around, regaining lost ground and pushing some of the enemy forces back. The fight was far from over, but now he had a glimmer of hope that he would not be the last Hokage of Konoha. Looking down at the map before him, his eyes caught the area where Kakashi was last seen. He didn't believe the Kopinin was dead. Call it gut intuition or simple wishful thinking, but he believed Kakashi was too skilled to allow himself to be killed in such a simple manner. That meant Kakashi was alive out there and either couldn't return or had decided against it. Where are you? What are you doing? Sarutobi couldn't help but wonder before shaking his head and returning back to the stack of reports. XXXXX Kakashi didn't know how long he slept. It had been dark when he first started chasing the paper, but the sun was out when he finally woke, though it was muted by dust and smoke in the air. His throat was parched and his limbs had stiffened during the prolonged period of inactivity. The one good thing he could say about his condition was that he didn't feel quite as exhausted anymore. He hadn't meant to sleep long, but if it gave him a little extra energy then it was well worth it. Grimacing at himself, Kakashi pulled out a soldier pill. He'd been relying on them too much in the past week. It wasn't healthy to take so many in such a short time, but he didn't have much of a choice. He needed as much strength as possible. Besides, the odds of him getting to the mirror and destroying it were unlikely. The odds of getting out and back to friendly lines again after the fact were astronomically dim. Getting out didn't matter so much as blocking the enemy's chance at obtaining Naruto. It was, potentially, his last chance to protect his sensei's son, his comrades, and the village, since the enemy would undoubtedly use the Kyuubi as a weapon. Wriggling another sip of water and only vaguely noting the small amount left in his canteen, Kakashi took a breath and pushed himself toward the edge of his hideaway. Moving hurt. It hurt a lot. For a few minutes, it took more effort than Kakashi liked until the soldier pill kicked in and dulled some of the pain. Then, the artificial energy took effect, buzzing through his limbs and pushing him the rest of the way into the open. The sky was dimming, though it looked like there were still another few hours of muted sunlight before night truly fell. The half-light would help hide his movement as Kakashi made his way to the tower. The distance wasn't far, but remaining undetected was vital. He wasn't in a condition to get into any more altercations with the enemy. He could really only afford one more fight, and that would have to be quick, ideally ending with the Hokage's looking glass shattered into 1,000 unfixable pieces. Kakashi moved through the rubble with slow caution, everything he had ever learned about stealth running through his mind. He didn't know how long he had before the enemy made their move, but hurrying into the situation thoughtlessly would likely get him killed. Crouched low, Kakashi dodged a group of aim-nin. It wasn't difficult. They sat in a circle around a small cooking fire propped against slabs of fallen-off building in the street. One snored with his head tilted back and mouth hanging open, a red-stained bandage wrapped around his forehead. The other three didn't look much more awake, injuries visible in the dirty white bandages tied around various limbs and heads bent low between slumped shoulders. The drawn-out battle was wearing on both sides of the fight, Kakashi reflected as he moved past. He had to admit to himself, one advantage to being so far behind enemy lines was they never expected to find a Konohanin and therefore they never looked for one. The thought was a small comfort to him as he approached the shattered entrance to the Hokage Tower. At this point, surprise was the only thing he had going for himself. XXXXX Pain unrolled the seal for Konan as she stepped closer, checking his detailed work with a practiced eye. The kunoichi wasn't as skilled with fuinjutsu as he was, and he wasn't at the level he knew their sensei had achieved, but he never kept anything from Konan and a second pair of eyes always helped. "This is the seal you designed," Konan said, more of a statement than a question. Her eyes scanned over the wide sheet of paper. It took up a large portion of the room, spread out on the floor and crinkled along the walls where the furniture was pushed back. Pain looked over his own work, eyes scanning for errors, trying to think through the possible unexpected outcomes of the untried seal. "It's not the original the Hokage devised. I was not able to reconstruct his seal, even with the sources at my disposal, but in theory it should work. The original seal was hinted at in the information sent by their spy, but there was no complete example. He believed the partial seal he found in the destroyed scroll was a prototype of the seal, but had no way to know the completed version. The seal laid out before them was based on the partial seal but largely Pain's own creation. Pain was certain that the original had been simpler, less circuitous, but he was unable to afford the time to refine it any farther. "You tipped your hand when you opened the portal the first time. The Hokage in that world will be on his guard, set up defenses," Konan cautioned as she stepped around the seal, touching parts of it as she examined specific portions. Pain nodded, just a tip of his head in acknowledgement. It was necessary to get the information needed for the seal. Konan was right, though, it would make the next step in the plan that much more difficult. It would be like storming a fortress's front gate rather than sneaking in through the back door. We will need a way to bypass any defenses they put in place. We know our opponent is the Yondaime. His specialties are Fuinjustu and speed. He'll have the area sealed with a containment barrier, Conan said. As well as guards. There are already ANBU guards, Pain agreed. The guards would not be a problem, more of an inconvenience. The barrier would be more of an obstacle. He frowned at the seal, mulling over the problem. It wasn't the first time the obstacles on the other side of the mirror had occurred to him. He could use the Nintendo Path * to discover the way to open the barrier from the guards. One of them would have to know. If that did not work, he could use the Gakudo Path * to weaken the barrier, absorbing the chakra that fueled it. Then we'll have to locate the Kyuubi, capture it, and return through the mirror, Conan said as she returned to the Pain side. Who are you going to send through for this? Nintendo and Gakudo will get through any barriers placed by the Yondaime. Chikashodo **** can create a diversion during the search for the Kyuubi. I would like you to go as well. Gakudo will stay behind and protect the mirror while you and Nintendo find and retrieve the Kyuubi. Pain bent down and began carefully folding the seal. You will be risking half your paths should anything go wrong. Conan moved around to the other side to help fold the large seal, mindful of places where chakra paper had to be attached to accommodate the large size. We should send additional men as well. Their presence could increase the confusion within that Konoha as well as our chances of successfully retrieving the Kyuubi and returning. Pain paused in folding the seal. He looked up at his long-time friend across the room. Conan stared at him with the neutral expression that she had adopted since Yahiko's death and the disastrous event of Hanzo's treachery. Her eyes, though, reflected the concern she held for him. He knew she followed him for his sake, more than dedication to the cause to why he had dedicated himself. If he decided to give it up and abandon the course they had set, then she would follow him without hesitation. If anything were to happen to her, he wouldn't be able to bear it. Sending extra men, though they likely wouldn't help or even make it back to their original world, could increase Conan's chances of remaining safe as well as retrieving the Kyuubi. He could replace any bodies he lost along the way, but Conan, his last friend, was too precious to risk needlessly. Very well, he said, returning to the half-folded seal. XXXXX, Jiraiya gasped, waking to a world of pain and an intense moment of panic. He couldn't remember where he was for an instant, what had happened or was happening. All he could remember was the intense need to get away, to get back to Konoha. He needed to warn Minato. Jiraiya. That was Tsunade's voice, sounding tired, relieved, and worried all at once. What? Jiraiya fought against the blinding light assaulting his eyes. Bits of memory were floating back, but they were disjointed and didn't make sense to him. Don't worry, you're safe. I'll get you something for the pain, Tsunade reassured him. Her voice moved away from the bed. You were injured on a surveillance mission to Amigakure. Just like that, everything snapped back into place, like a lock with all the tumblers falling into their proper positions. He tried to sit up, but fell back to the bed, gritting his teeth against a groan. The pain was worse than the time when Tsunade had beaten him half to death. He gripped the bed, determined to try again. Stop moving, Tsunade snapped, next to him again. You're going to injure yourself even more, you damn idiot. Jiraiya shook his head. He had to warn Minato. Yahiko. Nagato. Pain. Jiraiya still didn't understand all of it, but he did know one thing. His former student had become a monster and more dangerous than he ever thought imaginable. There's more than one, he gasped out, fighting for breath in a room that seemed to hold too little oxygen. I said hold still, Tsunade growled, then continued loudly to herself, fucking idiot, going off and almost getting himself killed. Doesn't know when to quit. Jiraiya managed to get his eyes open in time to see Tsunade sliding a needle into an 4 in his arm. warned Minato. Jiraiya gasped, near desperation, there's more than one dot of him. He knew he wasn't making a lot of sense, but couldn't make the words come out right, couldn't put all his thoughts in the right order. I'll tell him, Tsunade said. Her voice sounded farther away, the pain felt farther away, too. You just rest a few more hours. The world won't end in that time. Jiraiya's last conscious thought was that he hoped she was right. XXXXX Naruto glanced sidelong at the new guard staying in the house. Kakashi and Rin seemed more like family, a brother and a sister rather than babysitters or guards so. It was easy to have them there, but the new guy, Itachi, was clearly there for one reason, duty. It was Itachi's job to be there, his mission to make sure that everything was safe and secure, and he wasn't concerned with anything else, much less having fun. Itachi was so serious and a little intimidating. Besides the jerk in his class, Sasuke, Naruto had never really met an Uchiha before, and now they were all gone in the other Konoha. Naruto didn't quite know how to react to the man now guarding him. Looking down at the open book set across his lap, Naruto tried to ignore the shinobi's presence in the room. Instead, he flipped the page and took in the pictures splayed out in front of him for probably the 10th time that day. It was a photo album that Minato had given to him just before leaving for some work. Naruto had been too taken with the new gift to really listen. When his dad had given him the album, it had originally been empty, but Minato also handed over the box of photos they looked through the other day, saying that Naruto could choose which pictures to fill the album, so long as he was careful. Naruto spent the rest of the morning combing through pictures. Some of them he had seen before when Minato first pulled out the box, but many were new and all of them had his mother in them. He couldn't remember being so careful and meticulous with anything in his entire life. He checked each picture against the other, tried to find the happiest, funniest photos he could before sliding them into the clear sleeves inside the book. Now, Naruto was just checking, once again, if all the pictures fit, in case there was one he wanted to swap out from the box before giving the extra photos to Itachi-san to be put away. Movement from the other side of the room drew Naruto's head up to his guard once again. Itachi had moved from his position at the table to the window and was staring out across the lawn with a faint frown across his face. The Uchiha's eyes narrowed slightly and turned red as Naruto's own widened. Naruto shifted around to better see Itachi's face, then finally got up from his seat and moved next to his guard. He looked at Itachi's intense red eyes, then out the window and back. Naruto couldn't see anything remarkable enough to stare at across the expanse of grass, trees, and bordering wall. "What's wrong with your eyes?" Naruto finally asked, giving up on trying to find what was so interesting in the yard and focusing on the far more interesting set of red eyes next to him. Itachi's gaze cut away from the window and honed in on Naruto. His eyes faded back to their original dark hue and his expression passed from intense concentration to calm indifference. He regarded Naruto a moment before speaking. "There's nothing wrong with my eyes, Naruto-kun. It's an ability unique to my clan." Naruto's eyebrows shot up in interest. "Like a ninja technique? Is it really cool? What does it do?" Itachi turned from the window and moved back toward the table and the scroll he had been reading. "It's an eye technique, but more like a physical ability than the standard ninjutsu you learn in the academy." He paused, sitting down at the table and taking up the scroll again, but looking at Naruto as he said, "Simply put, it allows me to see and understand." Naruto frowned, glancing back out the window across the grounds. It looked still and quiet, a silent breeze moving the tree branches beyond the pane. "I don't see anything." He looked back to Itachi. Itachi's eyes moved to the window, looking past Naruto as the faintest frown returned to his face. "No," he agreed after a moment, turning his gaze down to the scroll. Naruto frowned in confusion. He looked from Itachi to the window a few more times, before shrugging and moving back to the couch. Halfway across the room he stopped as a shudder ran through him. A moment later, he could hear the front door snap closed and the unsettling sensation was gone. Shaking his head, he glanced back at Itachi only to find the shinobi staring at him. The dark eyes cut away as soon as Naruto caught them and Itachi rose from his chair. He moved toward the sitting room door and swung it open just as Kakashi's voice came through. "I'm back." Kakashi appeared in the open door. He nodded to Itachi before strolling over to Naruto still seated on the couch. Kakashi dropped a bag down next to Naruto, saying, "You can add these to your collection." Naruto craned his neck, opening up the shopping bag. Inside was another album, still covered in plastic wrap and sporting a price tag. With it was a large envelope. He pulled out the envelope and looked inside to find more photographs, including not just Naruto's mother, but his father, Kakashi, Rin, and even the old pervert, Jiraiya. Having those pictures, even if he hadn't been there for the moments captured on film, was the sort of thing real families had. "Thank you, Kakashi-san." Naruto cried, launching himself forward to hug Kakashi around the man's waist. The one-eyed shinobi said, "It was Rin's idea first and there aren't any of you yet, we'll have to get a camera." He gently shook off Naruto, patting him absently on his head. "Besides, if it keeps you busy from other things, then I'm all for it." Naruto laughed. "Don't worry. I'm gonna get Itachi-san next. You're safe until then." "You should take that threat seriously, Itachi-san," Kakashi said, glancing back at the other man. Itachi nodded. "I'll keep an eye out," he said with all the seriousness of the world. He glanced from the window to the door before shifting his eyes back to Kakashi. "Could I have a word, Kakashi-san?" Kakashi looked at Itachi and Naruto looked between the two men. They were doing that thing that adults did when they wanted to talk about something without a kid around. "Of course," Kakashi said, moving to the door. Itachi followed, closing the sitting room door firmly behind him. Naruto watched them go from the room, curiosity eating away at him when the door shut. Ever since his talk with Minato and especially since learning that Minato was his father and he was wanted and had a home, Naruto was deliberately trying to be good. A part of him still didn't want to give the people in the new Konoha a reason to send him back to the old Konoha. He also wanted to make his father proud. However, the lure to peek in on a conversation between the two shinobi was too great to resist. Setting down the envelope, Naruto crept to the door and eased it open till he could peer through with one eye. Kakashi and Itachi were standing out in the entrance hall. They spoke in low tones that failed to carry words back to Naruto's position, but the boy could tell from their expressions it was something serious. Then, Kakashi lifted his high-tie revealing his other eye and moved to the window. Naruto frowned as he watched the two men gazing out the front window. The low tones coming from the hall meant they were still talking, but no more comprehensible from Naruto's position than a moment before as he strained to hear. Itachi gestured to the door and then to the seal painted on it and Kakashi settled into a considering pose. The silver-haired ninja then said something and disappeared up the stairs. Itachi turned back to the sitting room. Naruto didn't bother dodging back inside as the Uchiha's gaze fell upon him. He moved to the side as Itachi came back into the room and sat back down at the table. "What did you see?" he asked, looking back to the window overlooking the yard. It looked just as normal outside as it had moments ago. "Nothing," Itachi said, pulling open his reading. The door swung open and Kakashi reappeared, carrying a small can of paint and brush. He turned around and began painting the same symbol lining the outer walls on the door to the sitting room. Naruto frowned at him, opening his mouth to ask another question. Kakashi cut him off before he could get a word out though. "I'm sure Minato-sensei would love to see the second album when he gets home from his duties. You better get started on it, Naruto-kun, if you want to finish in time." Naruto huffed, turning back to the couch and the abandoned albums and pictures. He sat down and pulled the new photo book Kakashi brought into his lap but paused before doing anything else. He watched Kakashi draw the seal on the door and then move a few feet along the wall before starting it in a new place. Naruto's eyes slid to the neat line of seals already marked on the outer wall and then to the window and the yard beyond. He still couldn't see anything more than a bright summer day that he wasn't allowed outside to enjoy, but there was something else too. The small shutter that ran through Naruto this time had nothing to do with the front door opening. XXXXX The tower was a wreck. Creeping through the halls, Kakashi cringed to think how many repairs they would have to make to get the building back to its former state, if that was even possible. Then there were the stark reminders of the fierce battle over the important landmark. Blood smears dotted the walls and floors in thick splotches, black from time and dust, some undoubtedly from Konoha ninjas defending the halls with their lives before finally being ordered out and falling back. Kakashi moved from shadow to shadow, straining every sense and analyzing every disturbance. Moving through the building was much more difficult than the grounds outside. There were more people in here and there was less room to dodge out of view. He thought about using a transformation jutsu, but couldn't afford wasting the chakra. He'd taken another soldier pill once inside the building, fully expecting to eventually get into a fight at some point inside the tower. His luck had held so far, though, and he was close to the target. Slipping into the staircase leading to the lowest levels, Kakashi increased his speed. The longer he stayed in the hallways the more of a chance there was for discovery. He had visited the lowest levels many times for his ANBU duties. The rooms were designed based on the classification of their contents. The farther along the corridor the more sensitive and dangerous the information got, giving guards a little more time to react should anyone attempt to infiltrate and steal anything. There were also safeguards to keep unauthorized individuals out of the increasingly restricted sections of the hall, making it difficult to progress the farther a person went if they didn't have access or an escort. Following that logic, Kakashi guessed he would find the looking glass in one of the last rooms of the hall, where the highest security sections were located. Moving along, he could tell that the various protective seals had been deactivated, but that was to be expected. He wasn't sure if he hoped the looking glass's room was still sealed or not. The Sandaime said that the enemy had mostly likely found the looking glass, but that was just a speculation. Everything pointed to the room already being opened, but Kakashi quickly ran a scenario through his mind on what he would do if the looking glass wasn't compromised yet. He could either leave or break into the room and destroy it anyway. A strong part of him said to destroy it either way, but he put the final decision off till he knew for certain. Coming to the end of the hall, Kakashi was glad he didn't waste the effort worrying about the room not being opened. He could see the large hole in the wall from a long way down the corridor. There was a light, too, and voices. The light spilling from the hole created two long shadows down either side of the corridor, which Kakashi used to draw closer. The voices were low and almost indistinguishable. Kakashi would have only been able to pick out a few words in the best of circumstances, but it was not the best circumstances and Kakashi couldn't make out anything. Kakashi crept to the door, staying in the dark corners and smothering any chakra that might be picked up by the occupants of the room. The effort taxed his already exhausted frame and he was glad he took one more soldier pill before slipping into the tower. It filled his limbs with jittery energy that wasn't healthy in the long term, but if Kakashi was honest with himself, he knew long-term health was not something he needed to worry about at this point in time. In an initial sweep, Kakashi counted at least 8 Jounin-level shinobi in the room. 5 of them wore black cloaks with red and white clouds across them. He'd heard some intel concerning a rising criminal organization with cloaks matching that same description. However, the information they'd received was vague and largely unconfirmed. The only thing Kakashi knew for certain was that the members were extremely dangerous, high-leveled shinobi. And there were 5 of them in that room. For a moment, Kakashi felt torn. This was vital information for the village. He didn't know why the black-cloaked figures hadn't participated in the fighting yet, but he did know that if they got actively involved in the battle, the exhausted Konoha forces would not be able to stand against them. The Hokage would need to know that the enemy forces had high-ranking shinobi that had yet to even enter the battle, but that very same fact gave Kakashi pause. Why hadn't they helped in the fighting? Kakashi thought back to the Hokage's theory on the reasoning behind the invasion, to diminish Konoha's military strength and to capture the Kyuubi. Konoha's military was already deeply damaged by the invasion. Even if the village managed to push out the invaders sooner than expected, they would still be recovering for years to come. The loss of men, materials, and facilities was a devastating blow for the hidden village. In every respect, that first goal was already achieved. The only thing left was securing the Kyuubi, and here were possibly the highest level shinobi the enemy had about to embark on a mission to do precisely that. If that was really the case, and everything did point to it, then the best way for Kakashi to derail the enemy's plans was still to destroy the mirror. Considering the 8 obstacles between Kakashi and his goal, it was a task easier said than done. On the other side of the room, Kakashi could see the mirror, a black polished chakra crystal reflecting the torches around the room. A flash swept across the mirror and the dark surface disappeared, replaced by the image of a similar room glowing with its own light. He couldn't make out any more of the other side of the glass, but it didn't matter. He was more concerned with what was happening on his side of the mirror. The Aimnin had spread out a seal drawn on large pieces of chakra paper stuck together. It covered the floor in front of the mirror, draped over rubble from the damaged walls and door. The 3 shinobi dressed in standard Jounin uniforms stood off to the side, while the 5 black-cloaked figures were gathered around the glass itself. One of them was crouched before the glass, circled by the others. From his position, Kakashi guessed that he had activated the mirror. The situation was worse than Kakashi had thought. Clearly, the enemy had already determined how to activate the mirror. Looking down at the seal, he wondered if they were attempting to transport troops through the mirror. From what he could see, the seal spread out on the floor was different from the one devised by the Hokage, but that didn't mean it wouldn't work. There was more than one way to skin a cat, or perform a technique in this case. The seal began to glow. The glow spread over the seal and to the mirror, making the looking glass glow with additional light, and Kakashi knew his time was running out. His gut told him the shinobi gathered in that room were preparing to go after Naruto. Beyond the looking glass itself, he didn't know if any other barriers stood between Naruto and his pursuers. He thought he could hear voices from the other side of the mirror, but they were too low to make out and his view of the other world too obscured to see what was happening on that side. Kakashi silently checked his few supplies in his hip pack. There was a smoke bomb, several explosive tags, and a few shuriken, hardly the size of arsenal he'd want when taking on 8 jounin on his own. He was running though the possible plans of assault he could take when his one advantage was suddenly stripped away from him in an instant. A force, Kakashi couldn't describe what exactly, grabbed at him, pulling him toward the room and away from his cover. He barely had time to substitute himself with a shadow clone, allowing the clone to be dragged out into the midst of the group. The clone managed to grab one of the sides to the broken doorway, clinging on as the force pulled its feet off the ground. Kakashi knew the clone wouldn't last long given his current chakra levels. His surprise was ruined and he had to act quickly if he still wanted to salvage the situation. Apparently, the enemy had similar constraints for time because the figure kneeling on the ground spoke. "Go through," he commanded. "There is not much time before the alarm sounds, if it hasn't been sounded already. I'll take care of the one here." Kakashi grabbed the smoke bomb from his pack, eyes fixed on the events in the room from his position. His clone still held on to the broken doorway, grunting with the exertion it took. The other figures turned back to the looking glass and moved forward. One of the red-headed figures entered the mirror first. He pushed against the surface and, after a moment, sank through to the other side. Kakashi heard shouts coming from the mirror, probably from a guard stationed on the other side by that world, but they were muffled and not his concern at the moment. The other figures followed quickly, pushing through the barrier, two of the black-robed figures first, then the Jounin, and finally the blue-haired woman. Urgency clawed at Kakashi as one by one he watched them pass through the glass. He pulled out one of the kunai left and prepared for his entrance. The clone was slipping and that would be the end of his deception. Just as the clone lost its grip, Kakashi leapt out from his hiding place throwing the smoke bomb down in the room. Thick, black smoke billowed out masking Kakashi's entrance. The advantage only lasted for a moment when that unknown force pushed the smoke back to the edges of the room creating a circular cleared area around the black-robed figure. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he noticed the force wasn't as strong as when he'd nearly been pulled out of his cover. Kakashi searched for the reason why. It could be a possible weakness he could exploit. In a flash of insight, Kakashi spotted it. Not 5 feet from the man was the looking glass. He didn't want to damage the device or risk breaking the connection with his unknown jutsu. The man hadn't even moved from his position crouched in front of the mirror, hands still up in the Hitsuji sign. He had to focus on both the mirror and Kakashi at the same time. Through the mirror, Kakashi could hear sounds of another battle playing out, but he had no time to look. When the smoke disappeared, he immediately jumped back into the remnants clinging to the edges of the room. He had barely landed and made his observations when he moved again. He darted toward the mirror, throwing his kunai at the man and pulling out a second. 2 kunai left in his pouch. Kakashi threw the second kunai just as the man pushed away his first. The man caught the second kunai, still not moving from his position and leaving one hand in the ram symbol. The movement wasn't lost on Kakashi. Perhaps the man had a recovery time after using his power? There wasn't any time to dwell on the matter though. As soon as the man caught the kunai, he pointed it at Kakashi again and it shot forward. Kakashi dodged to the side. Intending to take advantage of a possible recovery time his opponent had, he leapt toward the mirror, charging a hand with Chidori. He would cut right through the center of the mirror and hope the defending forces on the other side could handle the shinobi that had already slipped through. However, either he was mistaken about the recovery time or it was too short a period to take advantage of, because Kakashi didn't make it halfway to the looking glass before he was ripped off his feet and dragged toward the man. He barely had time to turn and look before intense pain sliced through him. Partly from reaction and partly as a counter-attack, Kakashi struck out with his Chidori already waiting in his hand. He cut up through whatever had impaled him and into his opponent's shoulder. Kakashi stumbled back, struggling to breathe and stay upright on his feet. He glanced down noticing with an unnerving disassociation the thick metal rod sticking out of his middle. He couldn't think clearly enough to guess what damage it had done, what organs it had hit. He was having a hard time just keeping his vision from blacking out and the world from falling over. His back slammed into a wall jolting him with pain and making him gasp. He desperately tried to use some leverage to push himself upright as he noticed the rage in the man's eyes before him. Kakashi dimly realized his opponent had strange, rippled eyes, something he hadn't seen from his previous positions. It was just his luck to choose an opponent with some new and powerful dojutsu. He groped for another kunai struggling to keep balance, but he was falling backwards, something which shouldn't have been possible with the wall behind him. Any chance to reason it out was destroyed when Kakashi hit the floor, though. Pain racked through him from the impact as Kakashi struggled to take a breath. He choked then fought to pull down his mask as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Another came as he tried to keep his lungs clear enough to simply breathe. Around him, the sounds of an intense battle raged, but Kakashi could do nothing besides struggle to breathe and expel the fluids choking him. With every body-racking movement, his strength drained away, most of it from the soldier pills he'd taken earlier. Time slowed and took on a surreal, dreamlike quality that was difficult to cut through. Part of Kakashi thought he must have already fallen unconscious because the last thing he registered was Minato Sensei racing past him and that was impossible. After all, Minato was long since dead. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.